All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our regularly scheduled Committee of the Whole for March 20th, 2023. As we join our meeting together, we just want to acknowledge that we're gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands and adjoining waters continue to this day. Up first on the agenda is just approval of that agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, that carries. We have adoption of the Committee of the Whole minutes of January 16th, moved and seconded. Any changes, corrections, amendments? Then I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, that carries. We go next to Mayor and Council verbal reports. I'm just going to go around the table. For those at home or in person, we just, once a month at our Committee of the Whole meetings, we just give the opportunity for members of Council to update each other and the public about items of interest related to some of the other committees and commissions and stuff that we sit on. So go ahead, Councillor Patterson, why don't you kick us off and we'll just work our way around the table.
I will be very brief. All the meetings I will be attending are upcoming, so I don't have anything to report right now.
Sounds good. Councillor Smart, although you're far, far away from us, you're online and this is normally the spot that you would be sitting. Are you ready to go now or do you want me to come back to you?
If you could come back to me, that would be great.
I will do so. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much. I don't have a ton to report other than to thank everyone who was able to attend the YES Awards, to all of the staff members who were there. Really appreciate the staff showing all of their support, and to the councillors who were able to be there as well. It was lovely to have you all there, and the youth that received awards were so appreciative. It was just a really lovely night. So thank you to everybody to help making that happen, and especially to Caroline Lawrence in the Parks, Rec and Culture Department, who always puts such a good effort towards it. I did have a meeting of Parks, Rec and Culture, and we were discussing things like the public art policy and looking for a report back to us in regards to public garden plots. So you can await that coming back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Had the pleasure of chairing this past month's Greater Victoria Public Library branch library board meeting. Excuse me. Obviously a main topic of the current new board is sort of pulling together, forming up the committees, the Planning and Policy and the Finance Committee to do the work of the board in the upcoming year. Obviously one of the top priorities and top items of discussion is the ongoing maintenance of service at the Oak Bay pop-up branch. So I was present for the opening of the pop-up branch, and the library board has been discussing the details of that with some interest, and also received a really interesting presentation from GVPL staff, who were actually invited to present at the Ontario Library Conference, which is essentially the National Library Conference on some of the internal processes that they had put in place. So it's actually a pretty significant invite. So had that presentation from staff there, and yeah, much work to be done in the upcoming year at GVPL, and also had the pleasure of going to the this past month's meeting, or this month's meeting of the Heritage Foundation, and they were noting, I think as you noted in your remarks last meeting, Your Worship, that the community had responded very positively to the reinstatement of the Heritage lecture series, and it was standing room only for the last one on Abkhazia Garden. Unfortunately, council was indisposed or was otherwise occupied, but I assured them that we'll try to make it next time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I'm a bit of a mixed bag. Some of my meetings are upcoming, but there have been two things that I've attended since my last report. One is that the South Island Prosperity Partnership did go ahead with their all-council invitation, and they ran a detailed briefing for everybody, and I think some of the people here were able to attend that. It was very good. They are changing their format for municipal partners to run bi-monthly meetings now, all in person, so that's interesting, but that's a really great forum, and I'm pleased to be there. And then we have the Social Planning Council here tonight, but a number of us were at the Regional Housing and Prosperity prosperity workshop that was put on March 6th, and with, again, Brent Tadarian, a fabulous speaker with inspiring and clear ideas and advice about how to go about addressing certain housing issues. And so that was really valuable. I think Mayor Murdoch was there and Councillor Smart. So yeah, and that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Smart.
Thank you very much. I was pleased to attend the municipal dinner. I also was pleased to and honored to make a presentation and award at the Yes Awards last week. Thank you for that. I also wanted to thank staff on behalf of the Oak Bay Tourism Committee. I learned tonight that the storage for the cart can remain in the committee room, and that was an issue at the last meeting of the Tourism Committee. Regional Water Supply Commission meeting was cancelled, but I am pleased to announce a new manager has been hired to replace Ted Robbins, a woman, which is exciting, from the East Coast, I believe. And so that's really a great thing. And the TTAC meeting, which is the TMEC Treaty Advisory Committee meeting, will be on Friday, and the CAO and myself will be carpooling to that. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been busy the last little while. I too enjoyed attending both the Yes Awards and the volunteer dinner, and just really, the volunteers that we work with, just so impressed at, I guess, their both involvement and passion for the district. So I had some great conversations. Also, recently at the Heritage Commission, Ron Carter gave a fantastic presentation on heritage trees, and I imagine council will probably get an update on that soon. But that was really well received, as well as I was so happy to see a great turnout at the TMEX Treaty Open House. So that was really good to see community getting out in the community, and I too enjoyed the recent engagement session that the Community Social Planning Council put on. That's everything. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. I get to update people every week, so mine's a little, but a couple of things I think of real note. One, I did, as chair of the Capital Regional Hospitals District, I was able out at the ground breaking out in the West Shore, this new long-term care facility, and quite an interesting model, three-way partnership as they often are between Island Health, Capital Regional Hospital District, and the province. And innovative in many ways of new ways of looking at long-term care, and it certainly gives me some hope for a multi-partner, sort of multidisciplinary model for Oak Bay Lodge in time as it comes back here. Just some budget updates. There are two boards that are close to or finished their budgeting cycles that'll have an impact on our taxpayers. One is the CRD, which has not quite finished the process yet, but have got their second reading complete and some fine tuning to come. But it's sitting around 3%. Oak Bay's share of that's actually a little bit less than 3%, but we're going to have some larger than expected flows through the sewer, so the operational updates on that will probably make it about a wash. You'll probably see about a 3% hit in the overall tax, which is very low overall. That really comes from some significant growth in the region that's sort of sharing those cost pieces. And then the Regional Transit Commission is the other end of that scale, where a number of years of backlogged expansion and investments are coming forward in the next few years. So this year is about a 20% increase, which sounds huge, but it's about $33 a household. Interestingly, a big portion of that is being driven by, some service expansion to some of the Western communities and so forth, but also a significant amount just from capital requirements. So as the fleet's growing out, there's a new Handy Dart Center, which is being built now and is having to be funded. There's also some new bus maintenance and depot centers. Probably most importantly, or most significantly, not in terms of cost, but probably for the long-term future, is the first implementation of the electric bus infrastructure, both the service depots, the recharging depots, et cetera, and all the infrastructure coming in. So, that's a huge ticket item. Generally speaking, municipalities share out about a third with the province and the feds for funding. In that case, the feds and the province are picking up closer to 90% of the costs. Which is helpful because they're very, very large ticket items, especially at this phase of the technology curve. So just want to acknowledge that that's what's happening. That's pretty much the update on the big stuff of late. We now go to the public's comment and question period. This isn't for items on the agenda. Every item on the agenda is open for public input, except for the delegation that we have in front of us. So really anybody, this is at every meeting, we allow time for people if they have questions or comments for council on any item related to the district. This is your chance to raise your hand. If you're calling in, if you're watching the live stream, you can call the 1-855 number, enter the passcode and the meeting ID and passcode and hit *9 to raise your hand. It'll show up in our systems. If you're on the Zoom call, then you can just hit the reactions tab within Zoom and raise your hand. I appreciate there's sometimes a bit of a lag and not seeing anybody online currently. It might take a couple of minutes to come in. So I'll leave the public comment and question period open. And what I'll do is just, if anybody raises your hand in the next 5 minutes or so, we'll come back to you. And I think I'll just invite, we have a delegation here with us tonight to speak. So why don't I do that on item 6.1 on the agenda, which is the Community Social Planning Council presentation. You know what you're doing. Come to the front if you don't mind at the start of your presentation, if you could state your name, organization that you're representing, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to make your presentation. Then we'll have time for Q&A from council or the committee as well. You ready to go? Welcome.
Perfect. Hello. My name is Colton Whitaker. I'm the communications coordinator for the Community Social Planning Council. I'm presenting today alongside Kadani Pitt-Chambers, a research coordinator at the Planning Council. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for hearing our presentation today. Our goal is to highlight what we do here at the Planning Council and to keep a lot of important conversations going. And I recognize we do have a presentation. Is that up there or? Okay.
So the answer to that question, for those at home who couldn't hear it, is yes, it'll be coming up online here in just a minute. Any second now.
Perfect. Thank you.
It is in our agenda packages, though, so we can follow along. If you want to start, we can maybe...
Sure, yeah, of course. So the first slide is really just a bit of a background about us. We've been around since 1936 in Greater Victoria. We have 4 focus areas as an organization. The first being housing affordability. In this space just last week, or sorry, 2 weeks ago on March 8th, we had the point in time count. The point in time count is a survey that's done every couple of years. And through the survey, we collect data on the demographics, history, and service needs of those experiencing homelessness in order to help guide planners and service providers. In the economic justice space, that is the second focus area. Among many other things, we produce an annual on living wage report. This is where we calculate the actual costs for a family of 4 to live in Greater Victoria. And just in 2022, the living wage spiked nearly 20% to $24.29 per hour, making it the largest year-over-year increase in nearly 20 years. The third focus area is based around the community, and this is where we offer evidence-based consulting to other nonprofits through studies, safety, and well-being plans, and much more. And finally, and Kadani will touch on this later on in the presentation, that is climate equity. And in this space, we have safe during extreme heat events, and we're working on sharing best practices throughout the region. And I will pass it along to Kadani.
We're about 2 slides too far, I think, here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
There we go.
Yeah,
Right there.
we're just on the next slide here. Hey, hello again, Oak Bay Council. I'm back again to talk a little bit about RHAP again. Many of your faces are familiar to me now. I've seen a lot of you at our events as well, so RHAP doesn't need as big of an introduction. But essentially, we're really exploring getting all the 13 municipalities together, since all of these boundaries are so porous, to tackle housing affordability from a regional standpoint and really look to be making these regional connections instead of looking to tackle it just within our own municipalities. So yeah, this partnership has emerged because of that, and the project is really just looking to build upon the existing basis of all our housing needs reports. We really do believe that affordable housing is our ticket to supporting better economic development throughout our region, really bringing forward a community and holistic look at creating housing throughout our region as well, and getting our municipalities talking to each other a little bit more as well, just because we really need to highlight, emphasize just how much housing affordability that affects Oak Bay, affects Saanich, and has knockdown effects throughout all the municipalities in Greater Victoria. Moving on from RHAP, as I don't want to bore and tire you guys too much with it, as I've already been here, but these are just 2 images from our council learning sessions, the December 5th and March 6th events, which I think most of you guys were at both of them. And then just the next slide. So, yeah, just looking at how we're making a difference. I did speak to you guys before about moving this into stage 2. So the stage 2 of our project, again, is really just looking to build on that base and look at prosperity strategies and indexes for the region. So we can see here, our lead city here is the city of Colwood, and our partners in phase 1 were Victoria and Saanich, and we came to you guys looking for that motion for phase 2, Langford and Oak Bay. We're just really looking to increase our community engagement, make more of those counselor learning sessions available as well, have more meetings with our community of practice, which would be your regional planners as well, and really look to compile local policy, share all of our best practices, both regionally and globally, so that we can do a little bit of the legwork for you guys, and really profile housing and poverty and vulnerability that is throughout our region. I think it was really great that not great, but a good thing that the March 6th event coincided on the same week that we did our pit count as well, as it really does show the level of deep housing need that we have throughout our region.
I'll jump back in here just to talk about some of our other programs and services. We have the Greater Victoria Rent Bank. This is a service that offers short-term financial assistance to households at risk of eviction for reasons such as non-payment of rent or essential utilities. And again, these are interest-free, low-fee loans. We also offer advocacy and referral services to support people that are going through a crisis. And what we find a lot with the Greater Victoria Rent Bank is that this is often the first the first time that a person is reaching out for support. And what's also unique about this program is that it offers support for people who are already homed or housed, and it gives them that little extra support to stay housed and stay out of homelessness. We'll move on to the next slide, please. We found that on average, applicants accessing the rent bank were spending over 60% of their income on rent and utilities. And we're proud to say that we've helped over 2,000 people throughout Greater Victoria with our team. We'll move on to the next slide. We also have the ID services as part of the CSPC. This is a service where we help people whose ID has been lost or stolen. Having ID is crucial since you can't access housing, healthcare, income security, or other social supports without it. And we will go on to the next slide. And just highlighting what I mentioned on the previous slide, we've helped over 750 people in Greater Victoria get their ID. We're working with 28 community partners to help broaden this program and help as many people as possible. And I believe we have 2 grant proposals going forward to council regarding the ID services and Greater Victoria Rent Bank. And we hope to continue to work together with Oak Bay in the future. And I'll pass it back to Kadani.
So at CSBC, we also have a low-income transit assistance program, which, as it says on the slide here, is helping to improve access to affordable transportation across the region. This program has been ongoing since '97, and it's probably been one of the most successful low-income transit programs in the region. I don't want to toot our own horn, but maybe even the province. It's partnered with BC Transit directly, and it provides the council with discounted tickets, which we then distribute at a 2-for-1 ratio to different agencies. We currently work with 70 different agencies throughout Greater Victoria to distribute these. And so the way it works is they essentially give us a check, they come in, pick up their tickets or passes, and then they redistribute them through their own channels. So we kind of just act as a middleman with BC Transit in terms of getting them access to cheaper, more affordable bus passes. As a program partner, BC Transit has been really great throughout the entire thing, and we'd love to see this program also be able to continue as well. Yeah, this program has been through tons of different partners, ranging from ICA to working with groups like Planned Parenthood and organizations, and also working with vulnerable groups, so women in transition housing and Indigenous communities as well. Next slide as well. So this is my big wheelhouse, and it kind of also comes into play with the transit assistance program. So whatever we really want to call it at this point, I think we're all realizing that we're facing kind of a climate crisis at this point. And so these shifts in climates are having devastating effects, not just for our ecosystems, but also for people that live here in Greater Victoria. So in all these places built and inhabited by humans as well. We see an opportunity, though, in looking at climate equity. And so at CSBC, we've been working really hard to really instill equity in a lot of our programs. And so climate equity has also come up for us as a hot ticket item, not just in terms of climate, but also in terms of housing affordability as well. We work on a number of different things. We've done heat vulnerability infographics for the City of Victoria during the heat dome. The low-income transit assistance also falls into climate equity, as we're trying to get more people to mode shift out of their vehicles, maybe onto buses, maybe onto bikes. That's where our Saanich e-bike program comes in as well. It's part of something called our Transit Access Climate and Economic Security Program, or TACES. That program actually saw a huge number of people taking it up. We had 300 incentives, and they were all gone in just a matter of months. We had 120 of them going to income-qualified households in Saanich as well. So a fair amount did go to households that would not have been otherwise been able to have access to those e-bikes. We're also exploring CRD and gendered trail use to kind of figure out what might be some of the barriers to women and non-binary folks in cycling and using CRD trails like the Galloping Goose. And we're also doing a review of BC's carbon pricing. So a lot of little things we're working on in the space of climate equity as well throughout the region. And thank you. Open to any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions? Where did our guests go? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Watson.
I do have one through you, Mayor, please. In terms of the low-income transit assistance program, are you working, do the agencies come to you or do you go to them? And I guess the follow-up is Oak Bay Volunteer Services, one of the agencies who accesses the program.
Yeah, I can answer that. The organizations do come to us. We have years and years of partnerships with these organizations, and it's come through word of mouth or through the go to the organizations themselves. They do come to us. In terms of Oak Bay volunteering, I am not sure. However, there are Oak Bay organizations that we do work with.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Patterson.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and thanks very much for the presentation. It's great to see that you're working with so many different agencies. I'd actually just retired from United Way, and I know that United Way is one of the funders of some of the programs that you run, and they speak very highly, my colleagues speak very highly of the work that you do, so thank you for that. But could you just maybe touch on where the bulk of your funding does come from?
Go ahead, Mr. Chambers. Mr. Whitaker.
That's a great question. We got asked this question at the last council meeting. Our boss is not here today, but we can answer that to the best of our knowledge. There was a 30-30-30-10 split. The 10% comes from individual contributions. The majority of it comes from the province and municipalities, whether it be grants or loans, grants. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to our guests, and thank you for attending again and for the presentation. Just wondering, when you talk about economic justice, if there is any data that compares this region to other centers in Canada and how wage impacts affect the whole economic justice picture here in this region.
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry.
Small question. Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
Sorry. That's a great question. Yes, we do have that data. For example, with the living wage report that we do every year, this was the first year that we saw Victoria have a higher living wage than Vancouver. And that was because of the increased food prices here on the island. But there is living wage data and economic data that we compare throughout the whole province.
Go ahead.
And do we compare that with other provinces in Canada too, or is it focused mainly on BC?
I believe it's just BC, what we compare. We do work with the Living Wage for Families BC, so just the province, I believe.
Thank you. Just one more question, if I could. When we're talking about transportation, I'm just wondering if the discussion is starting to embrace the notion of transportation as a necessity for people rather than transportation as an entitlement.
Go ahead, Mr. Chambers.
Yeah, I can answer that. We're constantly looking for equity in terms of transportation, whatever that may be, and so we're really looking for that piece that I think you're asking about here. Transportation as kind of a necessity is something that we see, and why we have programs like the Sanish Bike program, why we have our low-income transit assistance program as well, because we really do know that people need to move, people need to get places, and we really do want to deprioritize private car ownership as the de facto way to move throughout the region, and really leveraging that we can be building stronger, active, and public transportation networks as well. Because before we can kind of build, something like a 15-minute city where amenities are close enough that maybe you don't need to bus across the city to get things, until we get there, people still need to move, and creating an equitable way so they move, so that buses are not stuck in traffic or bikers are not afraid of being hit by cars. Until we get there, we're always going to be striving and working towards that equity in transportation.
Thank you. We do have a couple more questions, and then we'll let our guests go. But go ahead, Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Green on my list, so in that order, and then Councillor Appleton.
Oh, thank you so much. Through you, Mayor, I really appreciated the learning opportunities to date this year, even if they sometimes left me realizing how much more I need to learn, but they've been fantastic. And I appreciate that you're studying the reasons and solutions behind the gender trail usage, as I noticed a startling difference in cycling for commuting between males and females. And I can't help but think that some of that has to do with safety. And so I'll be really looking forward to learning more about whether there's some great solutions that come out of that study. I wondered if you could speak more to Oak Bay's specific use of the rent bank in particular. Are you able to share some statistics around that?
Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you. So we're just finalizing the data exactly, but Oak Bay represents 3 to 5% of the rent bank, of people accessing the rent bank.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And then I just wondered, do you feel with the greater inflammatory pressures that there'll be a danger to some of your programs in continuing to run this year? I just wondered if you could update on sort of the approach of keeping these great programs running under the current environment of them being needed more.
Go ahead, Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point. We're fortunate to have a great executive director that has grown the CSPC from just 2 staff 5 years ago to over 10 now, I'd say. So we definitely have the resources in place, and we've been seeking in budget sustaining funding from municipalities, and we started to see that start to come through. So I'd say things are looking up, even though even with the current market and the current economy.
Great, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then Councillor Appleton.
Thanks very much. And thank you very much for being here and for the presentation. It's helpful. When you talk about transportation equity, just some questions came to mind. You mentioned women. I was thinking about girls and children as well, families, young families, around equity. Also thinking about demographics, but also people that have mobility issues. And I was just wondering how you're exploring or addressing that kind of analysis. Thank you.
Mr. Pitt Chambers.
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of for folks who are differently abled, that has mainly been one of the largest things that I've been looking at since I've joined on the CSPC in the last few months. There seems to be a large disconnect in the greater community from what we've seen, with folks thinking that persons with disabilities are primarily car owners or car users, which does not align with the statistics. So we're currently exploring different avenues of exploring not only making transit more accessible for persons with disabilities, but also how we can just make our cities more accessible for persons with disabilities as well. And we're have some things in the works currently on that, kind of branching off as well from the gendered trails that we were talking about earlier. Also, how can we make our trails more accessible and welcoming to folks who are differently abled?
Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you, thank you very much for coming. I was wondering, just in your analysis in the Regional Housing and Prosperity Program, you're talking about analyzing housing needs assessment reports and some of the existing data that's produced at the municipal level, and I'm just wondering whether you could comment. Obviously, housing needs assessments and housing assessments have a lot of useful data in it, but maybe aren't the comprehensive tool that, maybe would give you everything that you need. So I'm just maybe wondering whether you could comment on some of the gaps in data that exist between some of those pieces that you analyze to really get to the data and get to the analysis that you want to make, of to really capture the true picture of sort of the affordability picture for housing in the CRD.
Go ahead.
Yeah, also a great question. We know and understand that there will always be gaps in data. For our HAP, we've been using something called the UBC HART method. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with UBC HART, but that exists and is being piloted to essentially try to, manage some of the gaps that currently exist in housing needs data. We are hoping that will be a more comprehensive look at the actual housing needs for the region. However, we always like to say that at the end of the day, we're really just here to kind of push that Overton window. We already know that we're in a huge lack of housing that exists. So at this point, it's not really for us how much housing we're really missing, but just to show how deeply we need this housing. Because at the end of the day, I think that we all are aware that we're deeply in need of housing, and deeply in need more so of affordable housing. So although different methods may have different gaps in our data, and we're constantly working to address those, UBC HART stat is actually coming out as a preview at the end of this month. And so if anyone in council is curious about that, you can also sign up for a webinar that they're going to be hosting at the end of this month to go over their methods and analyze what they've done. So we totally recognize that there will always be these gaps, but at the end of the day, we're really just looking to show that we're in a deep need for housing. And whether or not we're thinking it's here or here, fighting about our data, we still need to push it over here at some point.
Thank you for that. I think all my questions have been answered, so I'm happy just to say thank you very much to the two of you for coming in today and presenting. It's very interesting work that you guys are doing, and I wish you all the best. I'm sure we'll see you a lot in the near future, so talk to you soon. Thank you. I don't see anybody who's indicated they wish to speak in the public participation period, so I am going to come back to our main budget here, which is moving on to item number 7.1, which is the Sidewalk Patio Expansion Program. For those in the audience who wish to address it, we will get there if they wish to, or online. But the process here, we're going to just get a presentation from staff. We'll have a chance for council to ask some questions. We'll open it up for public input. We'll come back to this table, probably look for some motions and have a debate on the direction forward. This is committee of the whole, so at the end of the day, this body will ultimately recommend to council a direction which should be adopted typically next week. So that's the process. We are in committee of the whole today, so it's a bit less formal. So if those are used to watching council meetings where we have a bit more sort of reliance on motions and debate, it's a little more relaxed in this format. With that, I'll welcome Mr. Bowl, who is our Director of Community Building and Planning, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also joined Director for Community Building and Planning, and online by Rebecca Taylor, our planning consultant. And Ms. Taylor will run us through a more extensive presentation, as she has done all the research and engagement work. and I've worked with her, of course, on developing this program. Before I hand it over to her, I just wanted to give a little bit of context. So the current sidewalk patios date back to the pandemic, the early days, where at some point temporary provisions were made by the province, but also by the district to allow for these patios to be placed on the sidewalk or on the street to support businesses with like a food and or liquor retail service. As the pandemic continued, but also there was actually an interest to see if a permanent program could be created. Council identified creating a permanent program as part of the strategic priority projects for 2022, and it was funded last year. So the project itself has been started up late last year, and it has included stakeholder engagement, research, and the development of a program outline that we're here today to present to you. Originally or currently, that program is still slated to end this month. As part of the recognition, you'll see, and Ms. Taylor will also get into this, but seeking for an extension to the current temporary patio, so this new program could be put in place, and permanent permissions could be obtained later this year. Meanwhile, there's also some news that it hasn't been reflected in the report, but the province recently extended their temporary program all the way to next year, December 31st, 2024. Meanwhile, though, the province is also now allowing and having an avenue for applicants to get a normal permanent permission, so to say. So I'll leave it at that as an introduction, and I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Taylor for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I should just take a moment, though, and welcome Mr. Green into the meeting. A fairly recent arrival in our district, most recently from District of North Saanich, and very excited to have you as part of the team here in community building and planning. So I'm glad you're able to join us tonight. And yes, over to Ms. Dowling.
Thank you very much, Andre, for that introduction. And I just wanted to let you know that this presentation is in 3 parts, and we've left time for questions at the end of each section, just because they are 3 separate sections. We'll start with, if we could move to the next slide, please. We'll start with an overview of the current process, which Andre has mostly done. So the purpose of the Sidewalk Patio program is to develop a new permitting system and a set of requirements for food and beverage businesses that wish to make use of sidewalks and parking spaces. As Andre mentioned, the province introduced a temporary expansion service area program in May 2020. I'll refer to that as TESA moving forward because it's a little bit of a mouthful. And that's to allow licensed establishments to serve customers on public property. And then the district supported that initiative by developing a temporary program shortly after, around June 2020. As Andre mentioned, those TESA permits will expire on December 31st, 2024. That's been extended from the earlier deadline of March 31st, 2023, which is where the current district approvals deadline comes from. And just to note that the existing patios in Oak Bay will require reapplication to this new permanent program, and they will be subject to new design criteria. And just to let you know that this project is a 2022 council priority project. So if we can move to the next slide. This is the timeline, briefly touched on it, started in May 2020. This current project started in the fall of 2022. And over the last few months, we've been working on some background research and best practices review, as well as some engagement activities. The next slide, please. We'll just talk a little bit about the current process, the temporary process in the district. The temporary patios have been approved under the Streets and Traffic Bylaw as a street occupancy permit, and it has been administered by the engineering department. Application requirements included a site plan and design drawings, as well as a $500 deposit that was to be kept by the district for the life of the patio, as well as proof of $2 million liability insurance with the district named as an additional insured. And then there were additional requirements depending on the application. So patios that extend past the business frontage would require feedback from directly affected businesses. So the businesses that would have the patio placed in front of them. And then if a roof covering or a deck structure was proposed, then it would require sign off from a structural engineer. So current guidelines include maintaining a 2-meter wide pedestrian pathway on a sidewalk that does not include grass, soil, or tree grates, and that must be as straight as possible. And the patios are to be enclosed and delineated by a railing or fence. And then they must not obstruct access to buildings, and any objects on the patio should not extend or overhang past the edges of the patio. And no signage is permitted in or on the patio, and that would include the patio umbrellas. There's also additional requirements for patios in parking spaces. That includes a 1 meter separation between the outer edge of the patio and the travel lane. Increased height of railing, that 1.07 meter height comes from the temporary requirements from the province, and that only generally flat street parking and loading spaces could be used, and that access points should be demarcated for safe transition between the patio and the sidewalk. So these are the current patios in Oak Bay. We have Ruth and Dean, and the Village Restaurant, which are both in Estevan Village. And Ruth and Dean is the only patio that is currently located on the sidewalk. And the remaining ones are located in parking spaces. And then in Oak Bay Village, we have the Tapas on Oak, which used to be called Blighty's, and then Hide and Seek Coffee and the Penny Farthing and Vis-a-Vis combined patio. And then, so we also did a comparison to some other BC local governments, and the complete comparison is a part of your agenda package. We compared the City of Victoria, Vancouver, and Nelson, and the town of Sydney. They all have sidewalk patio bylaws. Some of the regulations include $2 to $5 million liability insurance, and all of them also require that the local government is named as an additional insured. They all have an initial application fee as well as an annual permit fee that is generally based on the size of the patio and in some of them the area. So like the City of Victoria and Vancouver both have higher fees in their downtown cores. And then Vancouver and Nelson have restrictions on operating hours and noise. So as I mentioned, as Andre mentioned, the province has updated their permanent liquor licensing rules to include patios on public property, which was not included before other than in the TISA regulations. These regulations include the need to provide a plan with the current occupant load stamped and signed within the last 12 months. And they have changed their railing or boundary requirements to require the applicant to show that the railing and signage is sufficient to control the entry and exit of patrons, prevent liquor from leaving the licensed area, and prevent overcrowding. And then also access to the patios cannot be from another business or license type. And so these are going to be in place starting April 1st, and the TISA requirements and these new requirements will run concurrently until the end of December 2024. And applicants have the choice of when they want to be able to apply for these new provincial, the new provincial license. But both both types of applications do require local government approval. Next slide, please. So we also looked into accessibility best practices. These were gathered from patio guidelines across North America and Europe, because many of these places have had sidewalk patios for a long time. They include a straight and clear path of at least 1.8 meters wide, and the majority of the passageway should be at least 3 meters wide, which would allow 2 wheelchairs to pass in opposing directions. Patios should be enclosed by a fence or railing that is detectable by a long cane. There should be no obstructions in the path of travel, and they recommend that at least 5% of patio seating should be seating and tables should be accessible. So that's the end of the first section. So if anybody has questions about the existing process, feel free to let me know.
I have 2 questions. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Watson.
Thanks very much. There's a really big echo happening. I'm not sure if it's me or I feel like I should sing a song or something. My question is in regards to, you said that we're going to require an application to the new permits for to extend to December 2024. So do we inform the people who presently have those patios, or do we have an expectation that they will just know that they have to come and apply? I'm assuming we're going to reach out to them to be able to ask them to reapply for the permit.
I think that's coming to the next stages. Is that right? The next part of the presentation? The future? Go ahead, Mr.
Yes,
Cole.
that's correct. So we have reached out to all of the current permit holders, and that will be mentioned a little bit later in the presentation, but they are aware that they will need to reapply.
Councillor Watson?
Yes, thank you. I just would like your clarification around any distinctions that relate to Oak Bay as a permit issuer under TISA, to differentiate between the liquor and the non-liquor enterprises. I believe that Ruth and Dean is non-liquor, and I wondered if we just superimposed upon them the same requirements that we applied to liquor establishments, or if we have a separate regime under which we approve them.
Ms. Taylor?
So that is something that we have considered, and that was brought up by some of the businesses that I met with. The temporary program that we have does not have a distinction between licensed and unlicensed patios. We haven't proposed that in the current program, but that is something that we have considered, and that could certainly be could be included in the design requirements. Specifically, I think the biggest difference would be fencing. Because the fencing is required for a liquor license, but for an unlicensed establishment, we certainly could relax that requirement.
Thank you. I may come back to that later on in our discussion, but that's answered my immediate question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then
Thank you. And I hope this isn't a premature question based on where we are at in the presentation. Thank you very much as well for the presentation. It's very detailed. Is there a complaint resolution process involved with the overall process of licensing and permitting? And the only reason I ask, there is a site-specific issue with one of the patios located near Ope Avenue and Foul Bay intersection, the former Blighty's restaurant site. And we have had direct complaints from adjacent businesses about that site. And I've had a number of comments from residents, particularly drivers, who have a real issue with sight lines at that particular location. So I'm just wondering what the mechanism or what the tools might be to negotiate changes to a permitted situation. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Green. We're going to make that into a very general answer as opposed to a specific site. But Ms. Taylor, do you wish to answer that?
So that is something that we have addressed as part of the program outline that will be coming up later on in the presentation. There isn't anything specific within the streets and traffic bylaw for that street occupancy permit, which is what the temporary patios are operating under. But we are aware of the complaints.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor. Oh, Councillor, I'll go to first-time speakers first. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to our consultant. I'm just seeking clarification. First of all, when we talk about the application, and perhaps this is up to our Director of Community Building and Planning, but when we're talking about the application, are we talking about a joint application between property owner and tenant?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bowl.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in the current process, I think that has been the business. In the future process, I think it's a good question, and maybe Mr. Taylor can expand on that when she gets to that part of the presentation.
Yeah, we'll deal with that at that point of the presentation. Anything else, Councillor Patterson?
And the other thing I'm just wondering about is there is discussion in the report about either seasonal or year-round use of patios, and so in the conversation along the way, are we going to be talking about what the variance is in the requirements between a seasonal operation for a patio versus a year-round, and what has been considered by the district staff? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, Ms. Till, you can answer that now, or you can wait till the balancing presentation where we start looking forward to the future rules. Up to you.
That hasn't specifically been addressed in the slides, but I'm going to make a note, and I will I will talk about that as we're talking about the program outline.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much. Just a quick question. I know there's other eating establishments within the municipality who have outdoor seating, and I'm just wondering if they're not included in this because their outdoor seating happens to be on their own property, or is it something that they just haven't applied, or they're outside of the purview of this?
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
So there are a number of patios in Oak Bay that are on private property, and they would not fall under this program. They would fall under the development permit process. I believe Andre can clarify that.
For the record, Mr. Bowl did nod his head to that answer. Quick question on the existing rules that the province has. I noticed that one of the requirements is that access to patios not be from another business or license type. Can you just touch on that? Does that prohibit, we have, I know at least one situation in Oak Bay where a patio is shared by different businesses. One operates primarily in the daytime, one primarily at night, and they just both use the outdoor space. Does that policy from the province preclude that for multiple businesses to share one outdoor space, outdoor patio?
So we have discussed that situation. We don't know whether they have one liquor license or two. So if they had one license, they would be able to have a shared patio, because I believe that it is owned by the same business. So it is possible that they have one liquor license. If they have two separate liquor licenses, they would have to, under the new permanent regulations, have some kind of barrier between the two. So the patios themselves would have to be separated. They could be in a similar format, but with a barrier down the middle to separate one business from the other.
Okay, and the scenario that I'm thinking of, there's just one business built a patio because they use it during the daytime, but then they've allowed another restaurant, completely unrelated from a business perspective, to use it in the evening. So that it sounds like because they would have different liquor licenses, they could not use it, or they could not serve alcohol in that shared space. What would be the I'm just trying to understand what this new rule from the province would actually have as an impact where there was a goodwill gesture between multiple businesses.
That's a really good question. I don't exactly know. I think because it's possible that the province would say, and again, this would be up to the province, but it's possible that because they're using them at separate times, if the if the signage perhaps would be changed to indicate which business is using that patio, that maybe the structure could still be shared, but but we could definitely find that out from the province and get back to you at a later date.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate that. And just so I'm absolutely clear, though, those rules from the province, they are absolute. Like those are the rules that we have to follow no matter what we do. Or are those guidelines that ultimately our own internal rules could supersede or enhance?
So for the liquor license, though, in order for an applicant to get a liquor license, they would have to follow those provincial rules. However, they could still have a patio through the Oak Bay program, but not license it if there was some kind of issue that would prevent them from having a liquor license. But in order for them to get the liquor license, they would have to have approval from Oak Bay and meet those requirements.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Let's move on to the engagement summary portion of this, and then the last portion, and then we'll go to public input, and then we'll come back to this table. Please continue.
Thank you. So the engagement process, the plan was developed from the project charter, and it included a public survey that ran for most of January, 2 community forums that were held on February 8th. One was online and one was in person at the Windsor Pavilion. At different times, I should specify that. Those were promoted through social media and the newspaper. We also ran a business survey that was targeted specifically to businesses with an Oak Bay business license and a physical location in a commercial zone. And then we also sent out invitations to restaurant owners for one-on-one meetings and also to the stakeholders identified through the project charter. So the survey slides, there's quite a few of them. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly and just highlight 1 or 2 items from them. These slides do not include all of the questions from the public and business surveys. The remaining charts, as well as comments and quotes from the surveys, can be found in the engagement summary, which is included in the package. So for the public survey, we received 1,087 responses, which is really great. 90% of those responses came from residents in Oak Bay. So next slide. So 87% of those respondents said that they had used a sidewalk patio at the time of the survey. So that's really good. And 60% of those said their use had increased since June 2020 when the temporary patios were permitted. So then we asked respondents which types of businesses they would like to see using public space, and over 60% said cafe, restaurants, and pubs and bars, with a few people, about 35% being interested in grocery stores. And then we also asked them where they would like to see these patios, and they would like to, 73% would like to see them in core village areas and neighborhood commercial areas. So patios, we asked them when they should be allowed to operate, and 65% said they would like to see them all year round, and an additional 20% said spring to fall. So we also asked about concerns that the respondents had, specifically about the impacts that patios have or could have on safety and accessibility for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. And 38% said that they did have concerns, and some of those comments are detailed in the engagement summary. We also asked them which accessibility aspects they would like to be prioritized. And the number one was maneuvering around the outside of the patio, followed by access to neighboring businesses. We also asked them their preferred design standards, and the number one preference was aesthetics and appearance, followed by the size of the patio and weather protection. So now we're going to shift over to the business survey. We invited 182 businesses via email, and we received 59 responses. And 12% of those responses were businesses that have a sidewalk patio already, and 7% said that they would like to have one in the future. We also asked them if they had been using the sidewalk patios, and 61% said that they had. And we also asked them just for information to see who was responding, which type of businesses they were running. 36% were running a retail store, and 22% were running a restaurant. So one of the key things that we wanted to find out was what they thought the impact of sidewalk patios had been on their business, and 46% said positive and 34% said negative. We also asked them if they would like to be consulted, and 37% of respondents would like to be consulted when a patio is proposed adjacent to their business, regardless of whether it's going to be extending in front of their business or whether it's just next door. We also asked them when the patio should be allowed to operate. 57% said all year round, and 15% said spring to fall. And 54% said they would like to see them in core village areas and neighborhood commercial areas. We did get 24% that would like to see them nowhere. So there's definitely a distinct split between the businesses there. We also asked them about concerns about impacts to pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists regarding safety and accessibility. And 36% said that yes, they were concerned, but 51% said no. Their preferred design standards were size of patio, accessibility standards, and then mitigating impacts to parking. And then we also asked them if they believed that there should be additional maintenance requirements for sidewalk patios, and 70% said yes. So as I mentioned, there is more information in the engagement summary. We're going to move to the stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned in response to one of the questions, we emailed all of the restaurant owners in Oak Bay to meet one-on-one, and 4 restaurant owners accepted that invitation. 3 of those have existing patios and 1 did not. And their feedback was that they would like to see some flexibility in the design standards for the appearance of patios. We did also talk to them about a seasonal option, and they were concerned about limited storage options if there was only seasonal patios were allowed, because they do take up quite a bit of space. And then there was a concern about the possible impacts on parking for those who have limited mobility. So we also met with the Chamber of Commerce, and their key takeaway was that they would be very interested to see some standardization across the region, specifically with regards to the fees and the design requirements. And then there was also some discussions, mostly via email or phone, with Walk on Victoria and the Action Committee of People with Disabilities. And their feedback was that a lot of the existing patios are not accessible to people who use a wheelchair, and that it is challenging to maneuver around obstacles such as garbage cans and chairs on the sidewalk. Sometimes the chairs from patios can sort of spread out into the path of travel. They would prefer to see parking space patios that are built consist of a platform rather than having a ramp because it's easier to navigate. And they would like to see restaurants be required to ask waiting patrons, those waiting for a table, to keep the sidewalks clear. Next slide, please. So this is some of the feedback from the forums. People were generally supportive of the patios, but did have concerns about the size and location of the existing patios and potentially where they would be located in the future. They also believed that there should be financial compensation to the district for the use of public space. And they suggested that in the long term, the village commercial areas could be redesigned to separate pedestrians and cyclists from motor vehicles by using adjacent side streets and lanes. So we gave presentations to the Advisory Design Panel and the Advisory Planning Commission, and they included a summary of the consultation feedback, as well as the guiding principles that were developed from that feedback, and those guiding principles will be shown in a later slide. But we wanted to include this as part of the feedback section. ADP members, they were pleased with the extent of the public consultation process and expressed support for the program. They said that patios animate the street and provide a sense of community. Aesthetic values, as you would expect for the design panel, were a top priority, including addressing lighting, landscaping, potential noise issues, and then health and safety. They also suggested that patios could be referred to the panel for review, and they suggested limiting patio sizes to the frontage of the business. The APC also appreciated the extent of the public consultation process. They recognize that the sidewalk is a public space, and the district is providing a service by allowing businesses to use that space, and that permission may need to be withdrawn if access is required for construction purposes. They would like to see a plan for long-term use within a 10-year framework, and they also suggested the possibility of doing a 1 or 2 year review of the proposed patio program because it is new, and also an annual review of patios, existing patios. They also would like to see a focus on aesthetics with especially lighting and landscaping. And they also said that patios encourage people to visit Oak Bay. So that is a brief summary of the engagement feedback that we've received. So if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. Any questions specifically related to the consultation engagement process? I'm not seeing any questions in the room here. Please continue, Ms. Taylor, with the balance of your presentation, and we'll get to the broader questions after that.
Thank you. So we're going to talk now about the details of the new program. So as I mentioned, we've come up with some program objectives. We want to ensure that the program contributes to the vibrancy and quality of life in the village areas. We want to make sure we balance public and commercial interests while still allowing cafes, restaurants, and pubs to make use of public space. We want to create an approach to the use of on-street parking that is monitored, equitable, and accessible to multiple users, as well as respecting the needs of neighboring businesses. And there are some other guiding principles, and those are included in your program outline, which is, again, that's also in the agenda package. So I've broken up the design requirements into 4 sections, and those there's some highlights here in the next 4 slides. So we'll start with specifically sidewalk patios. These patios, we're recommending that they be limited to the frontage of the business, that they should be enclosed, and this is an area where this could be differentiated between licensed and unlicensed patios, and that they should maintain a minimum clearance of 1 meter from the nearest curb to ensure safety of patrons. And also those barriers, the enclosure barriers, should be designed to promote visibility through them to minimize the impact of those patios on the streetscape. So next slide. So now we're going to move to parking stall patios. We're recommending that they be limited to either one parallel parking stall or two angled or 90-degree spaces, or the edges of the business frontage, whichever is the shortest. There should be at least 1 meter of separation between the edge of the patio and the travel lane, and the fence that surrounds that along the traffic lanes and the parking areas should include reflectors to increase safety for motorists. If a deck surface is proposed, then it should require engineer drawings. And as per the existing requirements, they would have to clearly demarcate entry and exit points to ensure safety of people traveling between the two levels. So then we'll move to the walkway and interface and accessibility requirements. Pedestrian passageways are to be at least 2 meters wide, which is the same as the current regulations. They would also need to make sure that passageway does not include grass or tree grates. The patios should provide at least one table with accessible seating options. If an aisle is proposed between tables, as you're going lengthways through a patio, then that aisle should be accessible, an accessible width of 1.1 meters. And that patio should preferably be flush with the sidewalk, or provide a ramp that is suitable for all wheelchairs. And then some general design requirements. The design of the patio should complement the associated business frontage, and also be aligned with any associated development permit guidelines for form and character. The patio should be designed in a way so that it could be removed within 48 hours of receiving notice from the district for construction purposes. And in the case, we intend to include a clause that would require it to be removed immediately in the case of an emergency. And then also no signage would be permitted on or within the patio, and no tents, roofs, or walls are permitted. That's something that is a current requirement as well. So this slide discusses some logistics of the patio program. So it would require either a separate bylaw for patios, which is what some of the other local governments have done, or an amendment to the streets and traffic bylaw, similar to where it is right now, because that regulates the permitted uses on road allowances in the district. And there we have identified 3 different approval stream options. The first one would be a staff review and approval only, which would be recommended. And this is because we're also suggesting an appeal process where if an application is denied, and we'll discuss this on the later slide, it could be appealed to council. This is the current process in the streets and traffic bylaw, not only for the temporary patios, but also for other street occupancy permits. And it would be the fastest approval time of approximately 2 to 4 weeks. Another option based on the feedback from the advisory design panel is a staff and advisory design panel review and staff approval. And it could potentially allow for some increased flexibility in design requirements, but it would require a longer approval time of approximately 1 to 2 months. And then the final option is a staff and ADP review, and then council taking it to council for your approval, which would allow for the most of flexibility in design requirements, because we could keep things quite general, and then allow council to make the decisions on whether it's appropriate. But that approval time would be probably about 2 to 3 months, similar to a development permit. Oh, and actually, I'll touch now on the seasonal versus year-round options. So I had discussions with the City of Victoria because they are currently reviewing their patio bylaw and regulations, and they are considering making it preferable to have a seasonal patio because this would open up parking, especially for those patios that are located in a parking stall. It would open up parking during winter months when parking is higher priority for a lot of people due to inclement weather, and applicants would be required with a seasonal permit would be required to remove all of the patio infrastructure when it is not in operation. So for example, it could run from April to the end of October, and then they would have to remove that patio and store it somewhere off-site, or if they had storage on their property, they could just store it on their property and restore it completely to its original state. And then they could come back the next year and reapply for a seasonal patio. And so that's something that we could look into. Whereas obviously a year-round permit would let the patios be there all year round, which does reduce the amount of parking available during the inclement weather months. So this is the proposed new application process. Similar to the existing process, applicants would submit the application and associated documents, but there would be an application fee. And then that application would be checked by a clerk for completeness. And if it's complete, it would be accepted and sent to the file manager, who would then refer it to various departments for review. And then that file manager, based on those comments, could recommend approval or request changes or more information from the applicant. And once that file manager is satisfied, they would forward it to the Director of Engineering, who would approve or deny the permit as recommended or on their own authority. And then that permit would be issued once an annual permit fee has been paid, and that permit fee would be based on the size of the patio. And then that completed, once the patio is completed, all of the railings are in place, etc., then it would be inspected and signed off before it can be used by the public. So this is a little bit more of the logistics. We're recommending an annual renewal. It would be similar to the existing business license process, and would also be tied to the business license. And it would be, renewal reminders would be sent out at the end of the calendar year. If the applicant decides, or the license holder decides that they would like to have their patio for another year or another season, then they would notify the file manager, and that manager would check for bylaw complaints and also circulate again for referrals, just to make sure that there's no issues with the patio in its current form. And then that file manager would recommend renewal or cancellation. So then we were also recommending for a complaint process that they would be processed as a call for service and referred to the file manager, who would determine whether it's an immediate concern such as litter or noise, and that would be required to be remedied by the license holder within 48 hours. And then if the issue concerned the suitability of the patio in its current form, in its current location, something that's more of a wholesale issue, then that would be reviewed at the time of renewal. And then, as I mentioned, the appeal process, we're recommending that if a new application or renewal is denied by the Director of Engineering, who's the proposed approval authority, then that applicant would have the option to appeal the decision to council. So this slide's about financial considerations. I'm going to hand this over to Andre, who's going to discuss this.
Welcome back, Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as part of the program and the preparations for this, and part of the report production process, we were also asked to make a good overview of what kind of implications might be involved in setting up this new program. And a couple of slides previously, this one, there were the 3 options. Each of those options have different time implications for staffing time needed to process it. And we estimate it to be around 115 up to 215 hours. And it's still an estimate, even though it's kind of to a part of 5 hours. The annual renewal itself is much more limited. There would be a little bit of review involved for any concerns that might be that might have occurred in the previous year. In terms of the staff cost, and maybe that would inform a future fee, depending on those different options. The staff cost is approximately $1,000 to $2,000 for the different types of process attached to this. And then at the top of the slide, there's a reference to the annual license fee. You can also see this in the summary of other communities that do have patio programs. So we would probably borrow from that, but also look at our own local conditions and see that there is some kind of a licensing fee that unlike the current program, which doesn't have that, but it would give some consideration to the value for the business that is derived from this use of the public land, and getting some reimbursement from that for the district. Thank you. I think Ms. Taylor has one more slide.
Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Andre. So this last slide is just talking about next steps. So following this meeting, we would look to draft bylaws or bylaw amendments and guidelines as per the committee's direction. And then once those are ready, they would be brought to council for review and adoption, hopefully within the next couple of months. And we hope that the new program could be implemented this summer. So this would require an extension of the temporary permits. We are recommending, I think, until the end of this year. It's mentioned in the report.
I believe the end date is September 30th is currently.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'd be happy to take questions specifically on this section, and then maybe we could move to some more general questions.
I think at this point I'll take general questions and affect decision making as much as possible, and any direction to the to staff on this. I do want to also give a chance for members of the public to speak on this, but I will go to council first for questions. I have Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Appleton, Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Watson. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just had a question regarding procedurally, am I understanding correctly that in the past these have been reviewed by engineering, but going forward, are they being reviewed by planning? I wondered if you could clarify.
Mr. Bull?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. In the proposed program outline, the review would be led from the planning team in our department, and then once approved, it would be approval by the Director of Engineering, but the process itself, like the other planning application processes, would be supported by planners.
Is that anything following up, Councillor Smart?
Yeah, I do have a few other quick questions. So I really appreciated the comment about regional alignment, especially speaking towards affordability and knowing that there may be, common designers and builders executing these throughout the region. And I'm wondering, for instance, with things like the accessibility clearance that I saw listed in the report as a best practice of 1.8 meters, but then a suggestion that we might have 2 meters, and then City of Victoria having 1.5 meters. And I'm just wondering where we depart from kind of some of these regional standards. What is the decision making? I would hope it is to encourage patios, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to when we're differentiating ourselves and why.
Sure. Ms. Taylor, probably best give it to you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So the 2 meters is the existing requirement that we have. So we tried to stick as much as possible to the existing requirements. to make it a little bit easier transition process. As mentioned in the best practices, it is suggested that there be at least 1.8 meters pedestrian passageway, but 3 meters as much as possible. Unfortunately, the way that the sidewalks in the villages are designed right now, that really isn't possible for quite a long extent of the sidewalks. So this is our sort of compromise point of keeping it similar and also trying to make it as accessible as possible to everyone.
Smart.
Okay. I had an additional question through you, Mayor, just about the request for structurally engineered decking versus affordability. And I wondered, just knowing how expensive and time consuming it can be to have a structural engineer sign off on such things, respecting safety concerns, is this a standard across municipalities to have a structural engineer sign off the decking?
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm not sure if this is regional, but it's generally a good practice where there's structure in a commercial setting to have an engineer sign off on it to make sure that it is as safe as possible. So it is specifically for safety reasons.
Has any other alternative standard been looked into for the decking as far as other prescriptive building standards, or simply stating to building code? Just wondering if any other, it's so easy to make these comments of, well, this will be the safest, but then when you realize it can add thousands of dollars onto a project and make a project not happen, I'm just wondering if other things were considered for that.
Taylor?
We haven't considered that, but that is something we could look into and certainly discuss with the building inspector to see if there's specific requirements within the building code and see if that could be applied. There could be a reference specifically to BC building code requirements rather than an engineered thing. That might be something we would also need to check with the insurance companies that are insuring these spaces to make sure that their requirements are also being met.
Thank you.
And then am I correctly understanding that only one parking spot would be allowed per business? So many of the current businesses that have sidewalk patios that utilize 2, 3, or 5 spots would potentially be reduced to a much smaller patio and therefore may not find it an economic proposition to continue?
That wasn't my read. Ms. Taylor?
Yes, that is our suggestion. We had a lot of comments from, as part of the process, the engagement process, with concerns about parking. Parking was one of the biggest options that biggest issues that we noticed with the open-ended questions. And so that was something that we're trying to balance the needs of the public as well as the businesses. A parallel parking stall in Oak Bay is 7 meters long, so it is a reasonable size. And that's something that we also mentioned, we brought up with, when I met with the restaurant owners, I brought up the fact that there may be some changes coming, and their feedback was that the patios, they understand that the patios are a privilege for them to have, and that even at a reduced size, they would generally still be a benefit to their business.
Thank you for that answer. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Sorry, this is one more question, and then I'll pass it on. With regards to, for instance, some of the precedents in the region for parklets, where you have a communal parking spot, patio that's utilized by many businesses on the block, would these rules then, am I understanding, prohibit some kind of unique solutions like that from existing in parking stalls, because they wouldn't technically be in front of a business?
Ms. Taylor?
So through you, Mayor, I actually I've looked into the City of Victoria's regulations regarding parklets, and those parklets are created by the City of Victoria and then basically rented to the business. So the business, it has separate rules surrounding those parklets. And so we could, if that was a direction that the district wanted to go in creating those parklets, then that could be something that we address at that time.
So you would see that as not being rolled into these guidelines?
Ms. Taylor?
It's not something that we have considered at this time. We did consider the possibility of including the possibility of allowing businesses to extend past the frontage or move past the frontage of their business in unique situations. And that's something that could be handled as part of the appeal process because it would be a unique situation.
Thanks.
Okay,
I'm
thank
going
you.
to give Mr. Bowl a chance. I wanted to add something to that piece. Go ahead, Mr. Bowl.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is specifically for business-operated patio, so to say. The other idea we explored for parklets, a little bit different than the Victoria example, but maybe more borrowing from, I believe, that's what the Vancouver model is like. Those are public seating areas and are more part of the public space design, and they're not specifically earmarked to a business. And that's something that could be further explored once we get to the village area planning. We have a wider look at how we want the public space to look like in the village areas and elsewhere. We could further look into that as a separate. It's not. You could see it as a type of patio, but I think it's really a separate type of use of that space. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
That's all of my questions. Are we also commenting on some of the regulations at this point or simply asking questions?
I think we'll just take questions at the moment. We'll give staff or give the public a chance to weigh in, and then we'll come back to some comments. So I have a speakers list, but I do want to just follow up on that one question. If I'm reading these proposed approaches correctly, this probably be to Ms. Taylor. It would appear to Councillor Smart sort of question, if one business was to make an application for a patio and have, say, 2 or 3 other businesses, be sort of willing partners in that, one could apply, but it would be available for use for others. Is that a fair, assuming there's no liquor licenses involved?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that's something that could be accommodated if they wanted to share a patio between them, similar to the situation mentioned earlier in the meeting. That's certainly something that could be addressed. It's not something that we specifically considered so far.
Great, thank you. I have my speaking order as Councillor Appleton, then Braithwaite, then Watson, then Green. Patterson.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just picking up on this same requirement, this proposed, well, it's not a proposed requirement, it's a suggested requirement of one parallel parking stall. And I'm just wondering the logic, just sort of the conclusion there between the sidewalk patios are proposed at the frontage of the business, but the parking stall patios are not on the frontage of the business. And I'm just wondering why and I understand the concern about parking, but just in terms of consistency and in terms of how it's applied regionally, are the standards being applied to frontage for parking stall patios regionally, or is there no consistency to that requirement through regional standards?
Ms. Taylor?
So that is one area where there isn't a whole lot of consistency. So I can't remember which local governments off the top of my head, but some of them have it limited to one parallel parking stall and some of them limit it to the frontage of the building. So we could go either way and still provide some regional consistency.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Appleton? And then I have Councillor Braithwaite, then Watson, Green, and Patterson.
Thanks, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, I had questions around the parking as well, because I can't imagine it would be a benefit just to have one parking stall. However, we'll get into that, those discussions afterwards, I think. My 2 questions were, one, I noticed that on page 43, you talked about no tents, roofs, or walls on the patio. And so I'm wondering what constitutes a wall, because right now we have to have railings. Is a railing only a certain height, and then after that it becomes a wall? And that basically stops any patio from then wanting to, if we allowed it to be out there all year round, to not be able to have some sort of a roof over top of it, per se, would perhaps preclude it from being able to be open during a rainier season, because umbrellas might not suffice. So is it province-wide that it would be no tents, roofs, or walls? And what constitutes a wall?
Ms. Taylor?
That is a good question about a wall versus a railing. In this situation, the no tents walls or roofs is an existing condition that we have kept. The logic behind that is to try and minimize the chance that the patio will become a de facto interior space, which has happened in some other local governments, and they're kind of trying to reverse that process. So there is the option that they could, especially for sidewalk patios that are adjacent to a building, could apply to have an awning or use an existing awning as weather protection. But the wall versus the railing, the wall would go up to a height where it could then be covered by a roof. There seems to have been in other local governments some sort of scope creep with regards to the patio kind of turning into an all-season space, and we're trying to minimize that possibility.
Thanks for that guidance. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much. And then I was also interested in the seasonal, when you were talking about the seasonal, and having to remove the patio and then reapply and put up the patio at whenever the season would start again in the spring. So I'm wondering if we have any idea of what the level of work that would entail as far as the municipality goes, because I was interested to see also the number of hours that we were thinking it was going to take for an application. So if we did go seasonal, then that would increase that work scope considerably. So I wonder if we have any comment on that.
Ms. Taylor?
So with regards to seasonal application, they could, if they're keeping the patio the same, they could go through the same streamlined renewal process. It would just be for a seasonal patio. So that would reduce the amount of staff time. It would only be if they wanted to change, for example, the size or the layout of the patio, the design of the patio, that they would have to reapply as a brand new application.
And just for our clarification here, is the the suggestion that both seasonal and annual permits be permitted?
That is something that we are suggesting, because some businesses haven't been using their patios all year round. So if there was an incentive to have a seasonal patio through the fee structure, that might be something that they decide to go with, and that would free up parking if it is a parking stall patio during the inclement weather season.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite. Completed those questions. Move on to Councillor Watson, and then Green, and then Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Ms. Taylor. Most of my questions, I just have one left. They've all been answered posed by the councillors already, but I just wanted to ask you about the Advisory Planning Commission's suggestion about a 2-year review, and I don't think I saw anything in the proposal around a review period, and I just wondered if you could comment on that and whether you had seen that in other bylaws or reviews that are emerging in other municipalities, and what you thought a good practice might be around a review when you're introducing a new regulatory framework like this. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
So I don't think I haven't seen that short of a time span with reviews from the other local governments that I looked at. A lot of them that I looked at are in the process of being reviewed. I think potentially because of the TISA requirements and the new permanent requirements from the province. The suggestion came up because this is a new program, especially if we do change some of the design requirements or other requirements regarding these patios, then a 12 or 24-month review process might be a good way to look at how the program is working. I think from the City of Victoria, theirs has been about, I want to say 8 years. I think their bylaws from 2016, either 2016 or 2018. But so theirs has been a longer review process. But that's certainly something that was suggested at, I believe it was at APC.
Thank you. Mr. Bull, you had something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We do have one evaluation process proposed included in the program by monitoring for any concerns that might arise about any of the patios, and that's then supposed to weigh into the renewal when it comes up. And it's kind of a more practical approach to monitoring the individual patios. I think an overall program review, I would be a little bit hesitant to either recommend or support it from a staff perspective. It's quite time-consuming to do a project like this and do a fulsome review, unless there's really an important reason for it. I don't think in 2 years that would be fairly soon after an extensive process that we went through. But yeah, if council wanted to set something in place like that, I would probably opt for a longer time period, or first rely on that concern process, so to say, so that we can prove out the program on that basis. Thank you.
I'm just going to do one follow-up on your question, Councillor Watson, if it's okay, just because I'm curious in the consultation with the businesses, if we have any sense of like the amortization, the payback period for some of these. So obviously a 2-year review would also impact the ability to put these things in cost effectively. Do we have any feedback from the business community, Ms. Taylor, on what they should have felt given the cost of these patios that have gone in, what their expected sort of lifespan would be? They had no guarantees when they put them in, so I appreciate that, but was that part of the discussion at all?
It wasn't a specific part of the discussion, but from the conversations with the restaurant owners, it's nothing like concrete was said, but the feeling that I got was that those patios were a lifeline for them during the worst of the pandemic, and that there has been a significant financial benefit to them. I did have a discussion with one of the restaurant owners, and he mentioned that they kind of threw together their application for their patio quite quickly, and they've kind of done their own internal review and have some ideas of how they would like to make their patio more accessible and better designed as part of this permanent program. So I think they're definitely on board with applying through this new program, and they have already seen a significant financial benefit to their business from that opportunity to have the patios, especially during the pandemic.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt that, Councillor Watson. You have the floor still.
Not at all. That's thank you for both staff and Ms. Taylor answers to that question. That was really helpful. I have no further questions, but I will have some comments to make when we get to that point. Thank you.
Sure, comments will be absolutely welcome. Don't no worries. Councillor Green and then Councillor Patterson.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Ms. Taylor. And to you, following up on a comment about shared use, so that more than one business could share patio space. My question on that is, do you have any comment on, would that also include shared liability in the case of an accident or an incident? So in other words, which business, or would the group of businesses, who would be responsible for liability insurance, one, and a settlement if that was required in the case of injuries or an incident? Thank you.
I might just ask if this is even a topic of conversation. I certainly wouldn't want Ms. Taylor to give any sort of advice. As to
No,
what
no,
that
I'm not
necessarily
asking for legal advice. I'm
Yeah.
just saying around, is that an issue that,
has been raised.
that we should think about? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Ms. Taylor?
I would say that if they were going to share a patio, that they should still have their own. I would suggest that we request them to both have their own liability insurance, and that would apply. I don't want to provide legal advice, but my understanding is that it depends on whoever's claiming on that insurance to make that determination about who. So the insurance company would decide who would be the one to pay out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and down to Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I should also just clarify, the APC in requesting review in 2 years, we're looking at it in the context of the plans the district has to also do a village plan. And so it wasn't so much a review of each of the patio cafes kind of for the business and whatnot, but it was really the question of what will drive the village plan? What comes first, the patios or the village plan? And do they limit the village planning? So that was their rationale for raising that as a point of discussion, just for clarification. I guess in discussing this, two things that come to mind is I would like to, if possible, at some point in the future, have a mapped layout of, say, Oak Bay Village and Estevan Village that identify where the size limitations would, because of either the width of the sidewalk, plantings on the sidewalk, anything that exists in close proximity, where we might identify that we would be significantly lower than comparative patio cafes in other districts for meeting sidewalk requirements for safe use and ease of passage for pedestrians. So that's one thing I would like. The other is to understand what our process is here in this district. We don't have an accessibility committee at this point in time. And so what is our process for vetting our accessibility to these units? Where's the responsibility and authority for that lie? And then how do we report back to the province on it?
Not to the reporting back to the province, because that's not a requirement here on this piece, but Ms. Taylor, in terms of the accessibility recommendations that are included here, perhaps you can just touch on where those come from and where they sit in the spectrum of accessibility.
Yes, thank you. So I have, as I mentioned in my presentation, I have discussed with a couple of local accessibility advocacy groups, and my intent would be once we have more detailed, once council has provided direction on the design guidelines, to go back to them and ask for more feedback to make sure that we're encompassing as best we can the needs of the people that they represent.
Thank you. And just, I'm going to turn another comment just into a question that Councillor Patterson raised, which was we do have some issues of very narrow sidewalks in Oak Bay. Is the sidewalk, free passage, you mentioned sort of, quite a range there depending on the pieces. Can we write into bylaw, a clear path related to the width of the sidewalk, just recognizing that they may have to be narrower than ideal in certain areas, but that could, should be at the 1.8 meters or 2 meters width where possible, and then as maybe scale down where the available sidewalk might be smaller. I'm just curious if that's something that we could look at as a scaling tool, as opposed to making them all extra narrow just because we do have to for a few select areas.
That's certainly something that we could look into. And I think that's why the majority of the existing patios in Oak Bay are parking space patios. And that's because it is very difficult to accommodate a patio on the sidewalk. Because ideally, in a best case scenario, a patio that's located on public space would still be adjacent to the building, and then there would be a clear path of a certain width beside that, and then you would have your street furniture, like your street lights and your trees and other things. So more of a one of the comments that we've got as part of the public survey process was that people liked the patios because it gave a bit of more of a European flair, and that's, I think, partly because they do have those wide pedestrian areas and narrower areas for traffic for motorists.
Thank you for that. My only other question on this, and I'll go to Councillor Braithwaite. I have one more question, then I'll go to the public input. Was just there's a recommendation here of no signs on the patios, but I'm curious if that is that all signs. I'm just thinking should there be some signage allowed for just making it clear these are business areas, not public areas, or that they delineate who they belong to if they're limited to a single business use, etc. I'm just curious about that. No signage, which seems like a pretty hard rule in the recommendations.
I think that should actually say no third-party signage. I think that might have been a little bit of a typo there. I think Andre maybe can confirm that, but I think the original discussion was no third-party signage on those, and then obviously they would be able to have signage indicating that it belongs to that business.
Okay, thank you. There's a bunch of sort of size of, okay, that makes sense around the table on that one. So I think that's good. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. Sorry, I did forget to ask this question before. On page 44, it talks about the approval stream options, and the recommended is the staff review and approval only, which would be 2 to 4 weeks. But just to confirm that if that was the way council was leaning, that would not preclude an applicant for then coming to council if they wanted a more flexibility in their design requirements. An applicant could still do that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That we wanted to streamline the process as much as possible, but still allow for that flexibility by bringing things to council as part of that appeal process that was mentioned, which would shouldn't increase the approval time if compared to the option of having council review all applications.
Thank you. Okay, I see nobody online that's indicated that is not someone I recognize, that's not here to speak to us. So as a member of the public, would like to come forward, please. And our process here, if you just step up, you can push the red button and you just state your name and association with this, but municipality of residence is also helpful for our records, and you're welcome to address council. You can ask questions, you can make comments. The floor is yours, sir.
My name is Matt McNeil.
You can sit back a bit.
I'm the owner of the Penny Farthing Pub and Vis-a-Vis.
Welcome, Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, Mr. Green, thank you for the water. First, let me just, there's so much to take in tonight, and it was all very, very informative. A little of it caught me by surprise. Ms. Taylor, we haven't met, and I don't recall getting an invite to be interviewed by you or asked by you, but I do recall you referring this evening to 3 different owners that you had spoken to regarding the issues in front of us.
You can just make your comments to me and say, you Mr. Mayor, I haven't spoken to Ms. Taylor.
Okay,
not
thank
directly.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, as you know, Your Worship, we've been open 22 years now, and I think we have the largest license capacity, both a food primary and a liquor primary. Both patios that belong to those licenses out front, a small one of 14 seats in front of Vis-a-Vis, and parking stall patio as well as Penny Lane in the back, our Theatre Lane patio. So a total capacity, I would say, in its existing state of about 210 seats, give or take a few seats. And so never having had the opportunity to participate in this study or answer some questions, I guess I'm a little surprised at the suggestion of the one stall per business, and so I'll leave that for now because we'll come back to that again, I'm sure, at some point. I listened to the comment of the seasonality. Bills go on 12 months a year. We live down here in what is the best climate in the province, and I can't tell you how many days per year. Now, maybe not. This February was a little wet, but notwithstanding, people sit on our patio, and the other patios as well, and I know they do. Being in the industry for 42 years, I have a number of acquaintances in the business in Vancouver, and where I'm from originally, and so leaving them set up year-round, both from a cost perspective, number one, and we do get some decent weather in the cooler months. It just makes sense. It just does. And you can put umbrellas on your tables if there is a little drizzle. People love to be outside, more so today than ever before, post-COVID. There are some who just really still prefer to be outside because they do. So I know you're going to come back and address this at another time. I appreciate you notifying us, as you said you would, with the stages of the process. But I do feel a little caught off guard with this. And yet we were there from the very beginning when you and I discussed this. And so I would like to be kept abreast of it in the future. If there's an opportunity for any input with regards to the presentation tonight that you all received, I would welcome that opportunity.
So there's a couple of things I want to just jump in here for you,
Sure.
not to cut you off, but I think the proposal in front of us is that both all season and part year are being proposed here as options, so it would be business chosen. And appreciate there's pros and cons to either one of those. But I would certainly, if there's anything specific in the presentation tonight that you've heard that you would just like to kind of flag as a possibility, because we're most likely to give direction to go back and give some direction to come back with some draft, some guidelines. And
Okay.
so anything you can give us that you thought, oh, that should probably be, have you thought about this, have you thought about that, are helpful at this point. So please
Great.
take this moment.
So from a design perspective with the patios, that one rectangular one in your presentation seemed to reflect sort of what we've built out front of our building. And I'm sorry, the last planner, the gentleman that went off, he had his fourth child and left you shortly thereafter. He had a ponytail. Paul? He was in planning or engineering. And he was there when we built this. He was over Haran, yes.
Director of Engineering.
Director of Engineering, sorry, yes. And he went off, he was shocked, four children that need to be at home, I guess. But,
He's the Chief Administrative Officer in Esquimalt now.
oh, is he?
He stepped
Oh,
up, yes.
I can only spend so much
He's spending
time at home with four.
Spending time away from the
Yeah,
kids.
yeah. But I brought up to him, because I was concerned at the time when we put our railings up. And I thought bollards going into the pavement, every, couple of feet, all the way along and around. And I look at our friends hide and seek across the way, or the one at the end of the avenue. And it wasn't a month after I spoke to Mr. Haran about it, and an elderly gentleman was parked in front of the Royal Bank, and he had the wheel turned the wrong way. And I don't know, so he hit the gas, and he went right across the street, hit my Director of Operations van, which was parked up in front of the bistro, drove it up onto the sidewalk. No one was hurt. No one was touched. But my thought is, if that had hit the patio, or anyone, it would have been the last time we would have had this discussion about temporary or permanent patios. And I really think that the engineering, and I know what Councillor Smart was saying, but they need to be engineered to withstand the bump of a vehicle, let alone the impact of one going full speed. And you're on a busy street. I look at it every day with our two pubs downtown and the Fort Street mess with those parking lanes and patios pushed out to the middle. That being said, I would like to see something that's designed, that's safer for our guests and for the community on those parking stall patios. That's my comment with respect to what I see in there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. McNeil. By all means, stay and listen to the rest of the conversation here tonight.
Thank you. I will.
And if there's things that kind of trigger later, by all means, I know sometimes in the moment we don't think of things that we thought of. Please just write us a letter and we'll incorporate that feedback as well.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to bring us back. I don't see anybody online, nobody else in the room here to address us, so I'm going to just come back here and we can have comments, but if there's any clarification that might come forward, go ahead, Councillor Green.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to Mr. McNeil for being here tonight. These are really popular. We know they are. I really appreciate Ms. Taylor's presentation, Mr. Bowles' report as well. Tremendous public engagement. I think everyone remarked on that. But I also, my concerns are basically the sort of safety and public safety around vehicle and pedestrian and cycle interface with these patios. I did mention the Falbeope Avenue Blighty's site, which I do believe needs to be addressed in our process, and I'm hoping that will occur. I recall 1 or 2 years ago we had the business next door, the framing shop. The owner came to speak to us about his concerns around safety and that particular site. So I hope that will be looked at specifically. I haven't heard too much from the public about the other sites. There's always some comments from pedestrians that they feel a bit squeezed sometimes on the sidewalks, but I think generally speaking, these have been a really popular move. And I would agree with Mr. McNeil that I think engineering, structural engineering is a really good thing to do with all of them. And then you have a standard. You have a standard of building practice. And also from a safety point of view, I think that's really important as well. But I think I think the report is very complete and comprehensive. And I think at the end of the day, it is not only about patrons and local small businesses thriving with these kinds of patio operations, but it is also about public safety. So that's the very delicate balance that we have to maintain as a council. But I really appreciate all the work that's gone into the reporting and the public engagement especially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Smart next on my speaking list. And Watson.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to overall say how appreciative I am of all the information that has come forward. I do see the success of this future program as keeping the existing patios and their sizes, and to even have some new patios. I've had overwhelming comments from the public about just how much they appreciate the vibrancy of this in the village. And so I just wanted to put that out there as seeing the, I guess, not wanting to have all these sort of specific, I guess the tone of it to be more permissive and encouraging. I'd love to see all year round patios across the whole frontage and encouraging unique designs. And of course, taking thoughtful consideration and appreciation to impacts to neighboring businesses. So I guess just the lens of affordability when we're looking at creating some of these rules and just regional alignment, I see is really important. I'd like to see builders consulted as with regards to the rules. I couldn't agree more with the comments around safety and bollards and the separation between patios and traffic. But what I see now in the requirements is that requirement for structural engineering linked to the deck and not to the separation between traffic and the safety concerns that were recently discussed. And so what I see happening there with the current wording is that it's going to just discourage people from building decks, which will make things more accessible. And so if we could look at how that requirement for structural engineering is described. And that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would first like to say that I thought that I think that the work that's been done so far and presented to us is very thorough, and I appreciated that. And I agree with Councillor Green's remark that notwithstanding the comment from the member of the public this evening, that in general that public consultation process has been very robust, and I think that's great. What I do feel going into this situation is that as much as possible, we want to be flexible when we start something new, because we don't want to cut things off at the knees that may emerge if we've put rules in place that would prevent them from happening. And in particular, I'm concerned about the rules applying equally to non-liquor establishments. I think that as we look forward into our future in Oak Bay, we're looking for opportunities to animate our sidewalks. And to the extent that non-liquor establishments will not be governed by the liquor control requirements of the province, that we should be open to allowing the cafe experience without enclosures or barriers, because what they do become are isolating and enclosing. And I think to have lively, public, engaged streetscapes, that we should only be doing that when we have genuine safety concerns. So, for example, Ruth and Dean, I don't see a genuine safety concern that would require a food establishment or congregating there for a cup of tea with a friend requires a barrier around it, and I think that would be a detriment to our streetscapes. I do acknowledge, however, that there are interests amongst the community for safe navigation around these venues for those with both mobility and visual impairments, and I do think we need to be conscious of that, but I think that there's a balance there. And I saw in the report a notation, I think I saw that those who had mobility, some of those who were contacted had mentioned the need for a long cane, being able to feel the barrier of patio, and I did wonder about that. I think in the context of something on the street maybe, but on the sidewalk, individuals with canes are navigating around all sorts of things that are there that they do get accustomed to, like the edges of bus stops and mailboxes and other things. So I just would ask for open thinking around that in terms of that really is necessary to meet those concerns. I appreciated the comments about the 2-year review. I think it would be unnecessary to do that, and I like the fact in the program design that it's anticipated there would be that check-in process, which really brings me to my 2 last comments. I do wonder, I appreciate the desire to make this as streamlined as possible. I think that's good in terms of the application, but we want quality development and use on our sidewalks, and the advisory design panel had suggested that their skills might be used in supporting that process. And I wonder if there's some way to think about that leads us to the best outcomes possibly. We have an experienced body there who could add value to this process, particularly in the early stages. And I wonder if there would be some way to incorporate them without requiring a report back to council, because I can see that adds additional time. So I'm sort of somewhere in the middle there. I thought that the second option with respect to their participation might be helpful, and if there's some way to do that with expeditiously, that I would be open to that certainly. And just finally, I do want to say that I think one part, I liked the suggestion from Councillor Patterson that we actually have some mapped idea of how much we can achieve on our sidewalks as they currently are, and then possibly in future as we change things. But I have a hunch that this 1 parking space requirement is too small and not nearly flexible enough, because we don't know what's coming next, and we don't know what other establishments may arrive who might want to do something that needs more of that roadway space. And I object to the idea, personally, that we would let parking policy drive the animation of our vibrancy in our village centres, because I think we've already seen for the last 2 years through COVID and these temporary requirements that we like what we've got and we want to tweak it. We don't want to restrict it to the point that we have less of that activity in our streets. So that would be my final caveat and concern, that I think a 1 parking space limit is not sufficient and it's inflexible in a way that we may find comes back to bite us. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I don't have anybody else on my speaking list. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I certainly echo a lot of the comments that were just made about this. My primary concerns are around accessibility, certainly, and the use of the sidewalks. I know how my use of the sidewalks has been altered by the when patios were installed, and I certainly hear about it from many of the folks that live because we're all in close proximity to the village, and often when we're coming to the village, we're carrying things too, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to maneuver some of the space. So accessibility certainly is an issue, and I am wondering if there is any potential for I will use the term design standards, but in a very liberal way. I think we do around the council table, and I've heard from the community to have some commentary about the appearance of particularly Oak Bay Avenue, which is important to all of us. And so I'm wondering if we could have broad design standards that would guide the use of certain types of material, or specifically prevent the use of certain types of material, perhaps more so. And I'm not qualified to comment on what that would be, but I do know that there are many jurisdictions where they have some design standards that guide signage or what types of materials can be used and all of those types of things. But it might help speed up the process and result in a product that we embrace in the community, which would be great. I guess with respect to the use of either seasonal or annual use of the patios, I'm wondering if we could have some idea of what that might mean for environmental issues. So if the patios are all going to use outdoor heater systems seasonally, what does that do for the district's emissions or carbon footprint? Whatever. So if there's any information with respect to that, that would be really interesting. I think also to inform me my decision as to whether I lean towards seasonal rather than full year, simply because of the wear, tear, and maintenance on external furnishings that are there seasonally. But certainly, I would listen to what comments come forward from around the council table, and certainly the community on that too, before a final decision. Thank you. Those are all my comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite. Or
Thanks.
questions are allowed too, of course.
Thanks very much. I do, have a few comments. I do like the more permissive and less onerous, more streamlined process, if we can implement that. So I would think that the staff recommendation where the staff review and approve would be the way I would lean, with the ability for businesses to come forward if they want a better design for their patio. I do like the sharing. I know that you brought this up, Mayor, about the sharing of a patio. I think that's something that's really good. I hope that we can get around the what seems to be in place from the province in regards to businesses not being able to share, because I think it really helps build a sense of community within those businesses as well, and especially the one on Estevan has worked out very, very well. I also loved the quote in this presentation that said that it animated the street and provided a sense of community. I think that is so true with these patios, and they have been a godsend really since COVID started, because a lot of people, as Mr. McNeil pointed out, did not want to go outside or inside to get together. They only wanted to be outside. So I think that that's really important that we continue that along. I would also, I'm not a fan of the seasonal, but only if I would support seasonal only if a business wanted a seasonal, but I think for me personally, I would have it all year round. And my reasons would be, and especially if we're looking at a busy thoroughfare, is that if we have one day we have a patio there, then the next few months we don't, and then the next few months we do. I think that becomes really confusing to the driving public, and I think it would be better just if we're going to have something like that it would stay in place. So I'm not sure. I think if a business wanted to keep it in year round, I would be very supportive of that. And I don't agree with the one parking space limited, like others have mentioned around the table. I think that some of the patios that we have in place right now have more than one parking space, and to then say to them, it's only one parking space now, I think that really limits them, and perhaps it would not be cost effective for them to do it. So I don't agree with that whatsoever. And let's see. I think that might be all I want to say right now, but I'll probably have forgotten something, so you might have to come back to me later. One of the other reasons I like the year round as well, and I think about the avenue during light up and the truck parade and things like that, and to have the ability to sit outside all year round. And there was people sitting outside on patios on the weekend because it was such a beautiful weekend. So I think that to limit it to just seasonal, I wouldn't want to support that. I would want to support the ability for the businesses to have either or, whatever they chose. I think that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Other comments this time?
I
Councillor
knew.
Braithwaite, one more thing. Just
yeah.
one more.
The only thing that I also wanted to refer to was that, and it was also another quote out of the presentation, was that it encourages people to visit Oak Bay and spend money. And I think for our BIA and for our tourism within Oak Bay, those are really important. That's a really important thing as well, that we do draw people to Oak Bay by having the ability to have these patios in place.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to first-time speakers first. If anybody else, I'm happy to jump in on my thoughts on this. I think the overall approach, the intent of this, of making it simple, the guidelines pieces, I think the majority of everything I see here I'm pretty supportive of. I actually, the comments I've heard around the table, I'm also, I think in terms of where people are falling, and I'm fairly in alignment with. I do think from a safety perspective, there's two aspects I just want to make sure that we're not giving up at any point or giving up the management of. One would be visibility, so this could be near corners or near crosswalks. I think those are really critical. I know we have a minimum railing height, but maximum railing heights have an impact as well, because then you get to the point where they become visible barriers that I think are problematic. And the other one, I agree with the speaker, Mr. McNeil. I think the bollards and Councillor Smart, you touched on this. I think protecting the seated area from the traffic is the key thing. You know, the flooring itself doesn't seem to be much of an issue as long as if it's well built, but doesn't necessarily have to be engineered. If it's being well protected, it's essentially a surface area. So I think the thought around how we frame that in a way that's clear it would be helpful. In terms of seasonality, obviously, I do think allowing the businesses to decide whether or not they want to be seasonal or year-round is a reasonable approach to it. I agree. I think it benefits having it year-round, but I think also there's a number of businesses that may just be for their own business requirements, want to have it come up and come down. Obviously, there's going to be costs if we're going to have bollards and these other things that might not make it practical. But I think that option, and I think we could probably mitigate that probably by more of a monthly fee as opposed to an annual fee, and if there's that willingness. I do think the licenses for on-sidewalk should just be annual. I think that would be just simpler and much more straightforward, because we're not asking people to put down structural pieces for the sidewalk patios. Granted, there's not very many of them at this point. I think that the size, I agree. I think one per business seems small in the scheme of things. I do realize that's probably a lot of frontages, but I think as long as they're large, they're primarily in front of the business using them, then I think that's probably a better measure than the thing. And I might ask Ms. Taylor on that question, if I might, because you've been part of this process and heard back from people. I think it's the smaller size was to deal with the not unreasonable comment that, we need these parking spaces, enough parking spaces to meet the needs of the broader business community. And so losing them hurts some businesses and helps others. But can you give us maybe some rationale that was given for the single spot? Was that just a look at what was being done primarily, or where did that single spot come from?
So that was it was a regulation in one of the other local governments that we looked at, potentially Sydney. I don't know off the top of my head. That might be in the comparison. But it is, so we were having a discussion as a team about whether we wanted to recommend either the one parking stall or having it limited to the width of the business frontage. And so we could definitely shift it to the width of the business frontage. I think that would work quite well in the Oak Bay Village, because I don't believe that there are parking space lines painted, at least on some parts of the street. So then that wouldn't have an impact. Obviously, if you limit it to one parking space, it might shift somewhat, but it then doesn't have as much impact on the surrounding parking spaces.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So that's where I would fit in, would be more the frontage than the parking spaces piece of it. I think the design piece I'm torn on a little bit. I think there's just there's some things I think we can get over bureaucratic on these things, that the statements that it should, be in alignment with the general design principles. There's a natural incentive for people who want them to be attractive, to make them attractive and high quality and so forth. And I think we should have some mechanism, if they're looking run down or grubby, to be able to go to the businesses and have that addressed. But I don't know that we need to be involved heavily in the design aspect, I think there's enough natural incentive there to make it work, particularly if we give some guidelines attached to it. And maybe that could be the offer of going to a design panel or something might make sense. I don't have strong feelings about the process. I think clarity of the timeline required is very important, because obviously if we delay an opening of a patio by a month or 2 or 3, that could make it unavailable for the entirety of the year, which is a concern of mine. And I do think that the maximizing the passage width past them is really critical for pedestrians, and that was raised by you, Councillor Green. That's sort of a critical piece of that interface between the pedestrians and cycling and cars and so forth. So I think that's a key piece. And there was one other thing I was going to say in my comments, and I didn't write it down, and now I can't remember what it was. What was the other piece? Anyway, it'll come to me, but I think that's the sort of the broad strokes of where I'm falling down on this one. I think the general principles here are strong. I think I think simpler is better, and what we've seen is that, well, there's some things that we would do differently on a couple of the patios, probably, given our druthers. It's overall been more net benefit than net negative, and I think we should probably make sure that we're doing what we can to make it feasible. I do think as well there probably should be a cost difference maybe between a parking lot patio and a sidewalk patio. I think that sidewalk patios, if there's room for them and meet the criteria, should be fairly inexpensive and simple. And as Councillor Watson pointed out, I think can be, from a design perspective, quite simple and open, and form quite a nice part of the community without having barriers up. Okay, I'm going to go to first-time speakers first, if there are any more. Don't see any. So, Councillor Green, you wanted to follow up on something?
Yeah, and just really quickly, because you raised something that brought something to my mind. I agree with you that we don't want to be overly bureaucratic on design requirements and so on, but I think we do want some minimum requirements around maintenance, because maintenance speaks to safety and health and safety, cleanliness and so on. So you said, we don't want grubby patios, and I would agree. I think we need to have the ability to enforce some kind of minimum maintenance if required. I mean, that would be at the discretion of the municipality, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the concerns of the, how these get implemented would be if they just can have them all year, but they only use them for half the year, that the wintertime would get pretty grubby until they clean them up again in the spring, right? So we want to make sure that if they're there, they're being used, and if they're not. And Mr. Bowler, Ms. Taylor, perhaps, is there a mechanism to do that? So if we implement permits for these things, can we ensure if they're paying for a permit for it, that they're actually using the space in that time, especially if they have structures there. Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think, I hope we have a guideline about this already in our program outline. And the other mechanism that we do have to follow up on this would be for any concerns that might be expressed by the public about any patio. That could also include the visual aspects of it. If there's one that looks really bad, I'm sure we would hear about it. That could be part of the process to work with the business owner to address that particular concern.
For that. I'm going to just turn us back. We spent a lot longer on this than I think originally intending that we would, but that's okay. It's good to kind of delve through it in some detail. We do have a series of motions here. I think first of all I want to get the motion to receive on the thing. Move receipt of the report. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that portion of it? Just all those in favor of receipt of the report? Any opposed? Not opposed. That carries. Then we have a couple of recommendations here in terms of the to grant an extension. I'm going to make a suggestion here, and maybe we can have a quick discussion. I think it should be longer than September 30th. I think there may be some organizations that want to keep them through this summertime period and maybe then take them down in the fall. And I think September 30th is early. It's still summertime. I think we're really looking at probably end of October, end of November, something like that is probably a better date, just to make sure that people decide not to do the current one. And that's what, before I make that suggestion, I'm going to just turn to staff and see, are there any issues under the guideline requirements here that would prevent us from making that extension a little bit longer? Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I don't think on our part we would have any concerns about that. Our thinking was simply kind of practical if the new program is in place and allow for a couple of months. But yeah, it's fairly efficiently planned. So if there's a couple more months, that could definitely be included in this motion. It could even be December. So there's lots of time for the businesses to make plans, submit any updated plans. If need be, go to a process with council. So. Thank you.
Maybe just end of the calendar year then is a nice rational number for that. So maybe that would be just my suggestion is maybe a better date for that, just to clarify, simplify things.
So and would you, I noticed that option 1 says extend deadline for existing patios and to set up the new program as outlined, but we've actually given a lot of recommendations towards the outline.
I'm just thinking we just do the second recommendation at this point, which is the grant an extension to the current practices.
Okay.
To regulate to the end of this year.
Yeah, so I'll make the motion to extend until the current practices until December 31st, 2023.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that portion? Don't see any, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. And then the last part, which I think is probably the more difficult one, because we seem to have we've had a lot of discussion here in terms of how to maybe tweak this in some ways. I'm not sure what staff would like from this. Would staff like to come back with a revised, probably my comfort here is that staff come back with some revisions based on the conversation we've had here. We can give it by motions, or we can just sort of take the conversation and come back with some options. I'm loath to say go away and do start developing, bylaws and guidelines. But I guess I'm just going to flag here as well. We need to have this come back fairly quickly because we need to sort of ratify this, give the direction so that all the businesses that are involved can start making their analysis of what they're going to be doing. So I'm not sure what the best wording here is, but Mr. Bull, may just turn back to you for a second. And you've heard a lot of discussion here on some of these pieces. They don't vary dramatically from the pieces here, but I think we've heard some ideas around maybe making those, and if it comes back in a structured way that we can kind of say, here's the things that can go through a voting mechanism, and we can come back with the guidelines very clearly and come with that, or I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying we'll ratify what we've heard here today, because I think there's enough variation that we need to kind of go through a bit more of a formal process. Mr. Bull, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 thoughts. I could see that we could follow up with an updated outline, but also with some draft bylaw amendments, or we split them apart, so to say, and first discuss the outline further at the next occasion in April sometime, probably. But it would mean that the bylaw amendments themselves would come later, probably in May. It would push out the timelines a bit more, and possibly the consultant budget, but it depends what council wants to do at this point. So I'm open for either option and to hear your preferences.
I have one suggestion, and I'll go to council to see if there are committee here to see if there's some direction want to be given. I think what might be helpful, if given the report that we have here and the very fulsome presentation that we've had, is perhaps we could refer this to council, maybe not specifically the next council meeting, that might be a bit tight, but have the issues raised here be brought forward in a format that would allow us to kind of go through sort of the list of options, and then I can kind of structure that conversation a bit more formally, so we can kind of go through and talk specifically to and vote on the size, the frontage, or the parking spaces, the seasonality, those sorts of things, so that we can kind of walk through it a bit more streamlined. That might be my suggestion, that we don't come back to this table in a month, but maybe come back to council as soon as we can, start teasing some of those out, and then use that as a direction for the bylaws. That's one thought. With that, Mr. Bull, would that format work, do you think?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it would work. I imagine that this updated overview would be quite a bit more specific and probably identify what kind of changes we would like to make to which bylaws as well. So we would respond to your comments that we heard today, and it would be a kind of an updated program outline for starters. No bylaw amendments necessarily at that point, or not in this scenario. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to go to Councillor Appleton, who hasn't yet even spoken, asked questions, but hasn't made any comments. So go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. Just picking up on that idea, I'm wondering whether or not it's possible to actually provide the direction to staff at this stage of the game. I hear general consensus on a couple of items, and I'm just wondering whether it's possible to actually, by motion, amending this last recommendation to provide some more information for staff to inform what they bring back, just to accelerate the process.
It's entirely possible. I'm just thinking that sometimes it's easier if we have it written out in a report that kind of just gives us some things to walk through. My fear is doing it on the fly is that we might miss something to give that direction and then come back on those. But by any means, you have the floor, Councillor Appleton. If you wish to give that direction, you can certainly make the motion and we can turn to it. I don't know. I also recognize it's 8:30 and we haven't got to any other items on the agenda. So my thinking is if we can bring it back to the next meeting, then we can maybe streamline that conversation a bit more simply. But Councillor Upton, if you have some thoughts that you want to just test, that might be a reasonable way of doing it.
Well, at the moment, the final recommendation isn't on the table, Your Worship, so I would make the last recommendation that council direct staff to develop the necessary bylaw amendments, etc. As based on the sidewalk SPEP update and engagement summary.
I'm not 100% sure we're going to get you're thinking that you're going to make the motion and make an amendment to it? Is that your thinking?
Well, Your Worship, again, the intent is to, I'm trying to act in a timely fashion on the content of the staff report. So I can appreciate the course of action that you've suggested. I hear general consensus for a couple of amendments to the existing guidelines, and I'd like to try to put them forward or test the will of council to put them forward at this stage of the game so that staff can be working more deliberately on those items before it comes to the next council meeting.
Okay, I appreciate so if there's a seconder, we'll take the motion as it is, and then we can deal with that if that's the will.
So that we can discuss it.
And I noticed I'm getting a little flexibility here. Normally we do motions and a seconder before we talk about it, but I just wanted to make sure people understood what you were trying to do. It's live on the floor right now, so it's open for debate. Councillor Watson, I saw your hand up.
Yes, I would say that I would already be wanting to propose amendments to the motion, because I think that if we're going to proceed with this at the pace that Council Appleton's suggesting, which I support, I mean, I'm happy to do that. We really need to be very specific about what those things are, because we've said a lot of things around the table, and we would almost need to have a bullet list, in my mind, in some kind of amended motion in order to take that forward. So that's just a comment, not a suggested motion.
Councillor Appleton?
Could I propose an amendment to the motion on the floor, Your Worship? Of course. I would propose that the motion on the floor be amended to include the following, that the proposed that in developing the necessary bylaw amendments, that the following three components be included, or the following three components be considered. That an alternative design process that does not require engineered drawings for components not directly related to safety considerations. One. Secondly, that the maximum extent be established at the business frontage for both sidewalk and parking stalls patios. And thirdly, that seasonality of the patio be left to the discretion of the business applying.
So we have a motion on the floor to make those amendments. Is there a seconder? I
I'll
don't,
second for discussion.
that's okay. So we have those three things. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton, you have the floor. There may just be some additional things that might want to be included as well, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think that the proposed three amendments to the existing recommendation necessarily detract from any possible comment or discussion or debate that council could have when this subject comes forward to a future council meeting. But again, I'm intending to give more specific direction to staff on items that I believe there's general consensus on to pursue. So again, the three components broadly being, firstly, that an alternative design process be available for things that are not related to safety, potentially the decking surface or those components which don't specifically relate to safety, with the idea to reduce costs and simplify the process for the applicant. Secondly, to respond to the single parking lot or space concerns that have been raised by council, to limit the extent to the frontage in both cases. I believe that that's reasonable and consistent with current practice. And thirdly, that responding to the debate around seasonality, that I believe that there is ample evidence to support that patio can be used virtually year-round in Oak Bay, and that the costs and logistics to disassembling and reassembling the patio may be an undue burden on a lot of businesses. So if it's council's will that there is general support for those amendments, again, this is just to give more specifics for specific guidance for staff so that what is received back to the next council meeting is more concise, more directed, and potentially essentially can be more easily approved by council or easily reviewed by council.
So I'm just going to make a point, if we're giving this directionality, that it'll be as is with these changes. So I just want to be clear that it's not directing these as a starting point. I think we have to make all the amendments here to do the pieces, but I agree with you, Councillor Appleton. They capture a lot of the conversation that we've had at the table. Sorry, Councillor Watson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Braithwaite, Watson, Green is how I had that in order.
Thanks very much. I agree that we don't normally like to do these things on the fly, but however, I think that Councillor Appleton has laid these out in a way that has captured what a lot of our comments have been. And as long as we're not just specifically limiting this to those three areas, then I'm quite fine to support this.
Watson?
I'm a little confused and concerned about that, because I would want two more things on that list to turn it from 3 until 5 at least, and maybe there are others. I think one of the other things that I would like to see is a program that does differentiate between liquor and non-liquor, that would allow establishments to have patios that are not enclosed, and that was one of the things we discussed, and I don't quite think it's captured in the direction and the motion so far. And then my other concern about the motion just as it stands is that we did hear from the public, and there was broad public input, like they really got on responding to this, that aesthetics and appearance are their biggest concern with these patios. And I just want to make sure that our design review process is robust enough to make sure we get what we'd like to see. And I'm not quite sure that that's in there either in terms of the sort of steps. We've talked about things like, should we have guidelines like that really are specific, or more maybe they're generalized around materials and stuff. And I wouldn't want to lose that, and I'm not quite sure it's in there either. So.
Councillor Watson, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, everybody, for your comments and the motion and so on. I just wanted to ask a question for clarification. The requirement for structural engineering sign-off, is that included? Is that part of this? And that recommendation I support, but that also came from our largest patio operator in the village, who also agrees that there should be some standard around structural engineering or how the patios are built. And I would agree with that.
I think the item 1 on this is that the design process not require engineer design for non-safety related issues. Yeah. So safety related issues still require engineering, an engineered approach. Non-safety issues not require that. Is that clear enough, Councillor Green?
Can I just get an example of a non-safety issue? Thank you.
Well, I think what was in the report was suggestion that if there was like decking material that brought it up level with the thing, that would require an engineered design, but this is suggesting that's not directly a safety issue, or at least not from a car impact specific piece. Then that would be that would not necessarily have to be engineered. It would just have to be designed in some way that would meet. It's yeah. My preference on this one is to take these comments back and come back with wording on this. I'm not sure exactly where that cutoff lies, but I will take that. That wording, I think, captures the intent here fairly well. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Just add my comments, and I really appreciate all the thought that's gone into it. I guess what I was hoping for was that we do come back with an articulated plan that based on our discussion tonight, and that we could merely extend the March deadline by another month to give staff a chance to sort of do that work and organize our thoughts and feelings on this. But that's my preference. That's not to say that I won't support the motion in the interest of expediting the process.
So just for the record, we've just had a motion recommending to council to extend it to the end of the year. So the current rules will continue until the end of the year. So we're looking now at the more permanent rules that we're going to be bringing in. So
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm making
there isn't a
reference to
rush
the
on this.
March.
Sorry,
I was making reference to the March deadline.
Yeah. So we're okay on that. I think that the stronger deadline is just, if we don't resolve these fairly quickly, then people who are looking to make changes are going to be without it for another year, basically, as they. So, okay, those comments. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. Another issue that was kind of front and center with the surveys information that came back was accessibility. And, I certainly appreciate this motion coming forward, but we have now extended it to the cafe use until, patio cafe use until the end of the year. So that gives us some time. But a lot of the commentary I'm getting back is that we are considering the patios, but the people who are also interested in just accessibility in general on the sidewalks don't really have a feel for what the longer term impact is going to be. And so that accessibility component and being able to flag areas of concern and how we are dealing with them, I think that's a genuine concern, because while the patio cafes certainly animate the street for the users of the patio cafes who can afford to go to the patio cafes, there are many pedestrians that access the village on a regular basis, and many of them, like myself, are crossing the road to maneuver through it. So I think that is a real concern, and along a separate issue from the patio cafes is the crosswalks and the visibility. So I think in some way we do have to have a better expression of what our expectations are for maintaining visibility and pedestrian access through the areas. And the one other thing that I think was missing for this, again, my opinion, but seasonal use of the cafes. I would like to understand what the implications of outdoor heating systems to allow us to use patio cafes on a year-round basis, the environmental impact of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have sort of the three pieces here, I think, in addition to what was listed here, I have the question about differentiating liquor and non-liquor. And do you need additional information on that, in your opinion, Councillor Watson, or is it just you want to have that discussion at the table for the...
It's not in the proposal right now, and I would like to have a discussion about it. I'd like that considered because it wasn't considered as part of this preliminary presentation to us. Thank you.
Okay. And just, I know, Councillor Patterson, you raised the question of accessibility. The current bylaw guidelines here address accessibility. Is your desire to change those recommendations, or I just want to make sure I'm capturing where people's general comments lie on this?
I think having an expression of areas that will be outside of the patio cafe itself, and I don't want to talk about just the accessibility to the patio cafe itself, but the accessibility of the public sidewalk and crosswalks adjacent to where the patios are located. You know, and I certainly appreciate the work by staff and everybody to get all of these patio cafes up and running in response to pandemic, and it certainly did add some vibrancy to the district. But over time, some of the bollards that were put up and some of the temporary crosswalk protections are looking very tired, and so, you know, I don't know if we just will say to the public, those things will wait until we do a village plan, or pending a full village plan, we will go back and revisit those in the context of these patio cafes becoming more permanent.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask the question on the visibility question, because I think this is a really key one. It's not, I didn't see it listed in here. Now, granted, I might have missed it. In terms of the siting and the design of these patios, is there any sort of direction required to ensure that in the design and the location of these things that from a is included as part of the safety considerations of siting? It hasn't come up a lot, but obviously there's a number of businesses that exist close to corners and so forth in our community. I want to make sure that if we're considering these, that forms part of the consideration. Mr. Bull, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm quite sure, definitely in the current program, I think that type of review was one of the key things that was done. I thought we had covered it off somewhere, but I can't find it either, so that would be a comment that we would follow up on and make sure that is reflected somewhere. I see a couple of design requirements more about visibility, but more the visual impact, and I think this comment is more about traffic safety.
So I think what you're suggesting, what's been made here as an amendment motion, I have a hard time with. I'll just say this, commenting on it, just because it restricts the changes to that. I think what I might be, but the wording is actually really good. I think it does capture what we've talked about. I might, if the mover is amenable, I might suggest we just also add, and that options be brought back on other areas like differentiating, as discussed in the meeting, something like that, so that it gives those core pieces kind of are captured and come back in the primary draft, but that we also provide some ability to provide some feedback on some of the bits and pieces that are touched on aren't quite as core to the design and so forth pieces. I think also I think the question about how we're going to manage this is going to be a little, in terms of the who's approving it and where, might come up as well. I think that was a reasonable question around aesthetics, but I think there's a few things, I don't want to get too bogged down, because I think the wording is so good. But Councillor Appleton, if you're amenable to that, as to allowing for staff to come back with some additional points that we could talk to when it comes back to the next meeting.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely amenable to that. The intent of these amendments was not ever to limit debate or limit discussion around any other aspect of, or to avoid or to detract from any other amendments that anybody else, any other member of council might put forward, or any other debate. Just that the intent was to provide direction to staff and limit their work, or at least sort of focus their work for things that I understood that there was broad agreement on, but not to otherwise constrain debate on any other aspect of the recommendation.
So it's here as an amendment, but if the mover is the seconder, Councillor Braithwaite, you're both amenable to that, I think we'll just take it as amended, as the mover and seconder are willing to add this in. So, thank you. So I think with that, it's very supportable, because it gives some freedom for staff to come back based on the conversation here and maybe lay out some options. I am going to ask that when that comes back, we're just going to have it in a bit of a table so I can bang through by resolution just to make sure we get this. 'Cause I think we got broad agreement, but there's a few areas that we probably don't. We may have to dive a bit deeper into some of the pros and cons to get to there. So that's great. Thank you, Councillor Appleton, for bringing that language. Is there other discussion on this motion as it stands right now? Okay, I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Smart, oh, you're on my screen here. I can see you. Don't see a hand raised in opposition, so you're okay?
Maybe there's a delay, but I am in favor.
Okay, no, sorry. I didn't, I probably didn't, I was looking. That carries. I believe that's the end of the piece of this item. Oh, yeah, that was the motion on the amendment. Thank you for that. So we have the main motion as amended to include that wording. So this is basically staff to come back with a report. Oh, sorry, my apologies, I'm on the wrong spot there. Still on the wrong spot. So developing necessary bylaw amendments and create a patio program based on that outlining with those changes and some other options. I think the bylaws probably can be started, but are obviously going to be subject to that final discussion pieces as we attach to it. Okay. So everybody understand the motion that's in front of us? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion as amended? I'm not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Took us a while. Longer than I expected, but that happens sometimes. Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for coming in this evening. And we'll see you soon. And we'll move on to item number 8.1 in the agenda. And I'm just going to ask for a motion to extend this meeting until 9:30.
I'll make the motion to extend to 9:30.
Is there a seconder for the extension motion to 9:30? Moved and seconded. Sorry, Councillor Smart, I'm not sure where you are, but I don't think you're in too different a time zone. Hopefully you're okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. We'll try and get through the rest of these in a timely fashion, although we still have public input and so forth on these. Thank you, Mr. Green. We have Mr. Coates, make sure I'm on the right one here. Yes. 8.1, Council Code of Conduct.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Murdoch, members of council. Just a brief report before you tonight on some new obligations resulting from amendments to the community charter last year. So the charter was amended to introduce the notion of codes of conduct, which are not anything that's necessarily new to local government. And in fact, Oak Bay has one that was adopted by the council in 2017. But what is new is the requirement for municipalities who have such documents to undertake a review of them within the first 6 months after a general local election, which is the time period that we find ourselves in right now. And so council has a couple of options with this type of work, and that is to either direct a review of the existing code of ethics, it's called here, or to make available to the public upon request reasons why council doesn't want to do that. So take that to mean that the code of conduct or code of ethics is considered appropriate under the circumstances. So staff have provided a bit of information for council in terms of work from the UBCM, LGMA, and Ministry of Municipal Affairs working group on codes of conduct and model conduct. And so in looking at that work and certainly being familiar with other such types of codes of conduct throughout local government across the country, on balance, staff suggest to council that you may wish to dive deeper into the existing code of conduct to at least consider sort of current trends and information that's more generally included in these types of documents now. They've evolved greatly over time. And we've presented two options for you to consider. One is to go in that direction, and as you'll note in the report, we talk about having capacity to help you with those considerations in early 2024 based on our existing work plan. And the other alternative, of course, is to make a motion that would say that you're satisfied for now with the existing code of ethics that the district has. And if that were to be the case, then council would be obliged to reconsider that decision before the next election. So the recommendation from staff is to undertake the review in Q1 of 2024, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Turn to members of committee. If they have any questions, go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess when it comes to council's code of conduct, I really think it's council's responsibility to initiate, update, and implement the code of conduct. And since the at last UBCM conference last fall, Resolution SR3, Strengthening Responsible Conduct, was endorsed by UBCM, and the document that came out of that, plus the supplemental documents leading into that, were all provided. I am wondering if it is not possible for a council-appointed governance committee to, in fact, look at the documents that were endorsed by the UBCM membership, which included most of the local governance officials in the province, look at the existing policy, and come forward with a brief summary report to council of how any recommendations for amending our existing code of conduct so that we could just wrap it up and complete it by year end without having to get into a very detailed analysis of multiple jurisdictions' codes of conduct.
I think that was more or less a rhetorical question as opposed to a specific question of staff, but thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Coates. Thanks very much for this, Mr. Coates. I was just wondering if it's not time for this council to actually review this 2017 policy. I think some of the language needs to be updated personally and reflect some of our own values and priorities that we identified as a council ourselves. In fact, I think perhaps every new council will and should review their codes of conduct just to ensure that they actually reflect the current council. So is it possible for us to do that work now, this year? Review this and update it and revise it perhaps? Just a question, thank you.
I'm just going to say, as Mr. Coates answers, I think that's the recommendation here. It wouldn't be done and come back to council until next year, Q1 of next year. But that would be, so I think the question you're asking is, could staff change their priorities and bring this forward quicker? Is that the question?
That was possible, but
No, let's ask the question. Mr. Coates, on work planning.
Thank you, Your Worship. So short answer is anything's possible, and certainly something would have to come off. We have a full work plan. We're still sort of recovering from a couple of months of staff transitions and vacancies and that sort of thing. So we're playing catch up. We have a number of items that are coming to council, the next agenda item, as well as one that's going to occupy some of our time to move that issue forward. So there's a progression of work that comes to council. But what I would say, though, that what we anticipate bringing forward more is facilitating a conversation amongst council in terms of what might be a suitable approach to take with this. But our ability to do background work that might aid those conversations, short of what you have in front of you right now, is certainly impacted by the workload that's ahead of us. And we could come back to council. I'd be hard pressed to sort of think what would be the most logical thing to drop without a proper analysis to that. But and we could come back to you with that, like we would with any other situation where we, council would want to sort of rejig priorities, and we can certainly expeditiously bring that information back to see what might have to sort of be paused for that time frame as well, because we're really sort of, generally speaking, full load this year.
Councillor Green?
Yes, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for the honesty. And that does bring me to a point that perhaps a governance subcommittee of council could actually undertake some of the background work that Mr. Coates references, and then it would be returned to them for return to us next year. So it's just a thought. I think it would be a great project actually for this council, a small subcommittee of council members if that was possible, but I'll leave that to my colleagues. Thank you.
So I'm just going to address that question because there's two ways of doing it. One is establishing a committee of council, which falls under the whole piece of the governance and staff attachment piece. It doesn't necessarily save us time. The other one is more of a task force that's appointed by the mayor of a subset. I'm just going to throw it out there, though, as a little bit of a warning on that one. I think, especially where it comes to things that are specific to council, because the biggest gap is not really touched on too much in this report, but when we went to the LGLA piece, one of the biggest sort of leading edge pieces that we're going to have to sort of come up with is the consequences aspect of a code of conduct and how that is dealt with. And I think the less we make that as a recommendation of some members of council back into this body and more of a professional staff, here's the options and here's what other jurisdictions are doing, that's probably a better approach to it than in some ways. And I'd be quite loath to say a mayor's task force should go forth and bring that back, because it's one of the touchier things that we're going to have to deal with. And I think it's a perfect time for us to have the conversation. I wish we could do it right now, because there isn't that. We're looking at doing this at a time where there isn't any conflict or any problems, which is the right time to be having these conversations. Hopefully we'll still have that in a year from now.
Okay, well, I'll just clarify. I appreciate your comments, certainly. I think it is something that we need to pay attention to, and I do believe it needs to be revised and addressed, certainly. The issues are always enforcement, the subjective nature of this document. Those are a couple of things that concerned me at the time when I looked at it. And and that it be action-oriented, that it not be just words and rhetoric, that it be actually say something meaningful. So those are my comments, and I appreciate everyone's input. Thanks.
Councillor Watson and Braithwaite.
First, thank you, Mayor. First of all, a question through you, please, to Mr. Coates. Could you just clarify, am I right in understanding that the charter now says this is going to happen as a matter of course after every election, right? So this will be in a routine for every newly elected council to do an update. Is that correct?
Your Worship, through you, the short answer to that is yes, and the distinction is that there are it's not a requirement, it's not a hard and fast requirement for a local government to have a code of conduct, but if there is one, that must be reviewed after the general local election, and if there isn't one, then council must still consider, that particular council must still consider the matter and make available to the public on request rationale supporting why there isn't one.
Thank you. So my comment then is that my own particular perspective on this is that we have something in place right now that is sufficient. We are meeting the legislative requirement by proceeding with the recommendation that comes from staff, and we've agreed on a work plan and allocation of priorities. And I would not support the idea that we need to speed this up to get it done within 2023. So I would be supporting the staff recommendation and the timeline for that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I just want to make clear, I'm not sure if I laughed or just smiled broadly when Councillor Green was saying something about the broadness of this, because I agree. I was not laughing at or anything, the things you were what you were saying. I just, I was laughing because when I read it, I thought, what a nice document that it exposes how we should all behave, but it's so high level, it doesn't add an awful lot of value to the direction. So that was my reaction to it when you said that. I was like, yeah, that resonates. So hope you didn't, I don't think you took it as any way as the negative, but I wanted to make sure that was clear. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. I'd like to move option 1, please.
Yeah, we can do receipt first.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the receipt? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And now I would like to move option 1 as recommended by staff.
Moved and seconded. This is the director review in 2024 and bring back the issues the Q1 of 2024. Okay, thank you. Now we can have a discussion on that. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, you have the floor.
Just like to thank staff for bringing this forward and being on top of all of this as usual.
I have Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also thank staff for bringing this forward, but I do notice in the documents that were jointly produced by the province and UPCM officials, that they do also recommend that in addition to considering external professional facilitation, councils and boards may wish to consider undertaking these sessions in the absence of the public, which can help to facilitate the open, honest discussion that will be needed to explore the issues.
Thank you for that. I think that's certainly something that staff could bring back as an option as part of the process. Is there any other discussion on the motion that's in front of us? I don't see any. I will call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move on to item number 8.2. We have the requirements under the Accessible British Columbia Act. Ms. Bagnall, this is the first report we've had from our Deputy Director of Corporate Services, who's joined us recent months. Welcome to the room, and thank you for the report. Please introduce it.
Thank you, Mayor. In June 2021, the Accessible British Columbia Act was passed with the goal of enhancing accessibility in BC through new requirements for government and prescribed organizations. Local governments must establish...
Miss. Is there, I think, can we just swap microphones? I think one of them is... Thank you, Ms. Bagnall.
Testing. Thank you. Pardon me. Local governments must establish an accessibility committee with members reflecting the diversity of persons with disabilities in BC and develop an accessibility plan that embodies the principles of inclusion, adaptability, diversity, collaboration, self-determinism, and universal design. This report offers an outline of the legislative requirements that are applicable to local governments by September 2023. And we have included staff recommendations for engaging the public in defining accessibility in an Oak Bay context. If approved, this information will inform the creation of a subsequent report detailing options for the Accessibility Committee structure and terms of reference. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of Ms. Bagnall? I'm just going to ask one question to start us off, and that is just, this approach is fairly systematic in its approach to establishing the requirements under law. We have other projects coming up that may require some additional accessibility lenses to it. And I guess the question I would have is there does this preclude us from, and B, is there recommendations for doing those kind of reach outs on a case-by-case basis as we're looking at some projects going forward?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. The approach to establishing an accessibility committee, as noted in the staff report, is organic to get a sense of what the Oak Bay citizens and the community prioritize as far as accessibility. But this in no way hinders the district's ability to make strides towards accessibility and to have those standards set in place even prior to the committee structure. Once a committee is formed, the committee can provide thoughtful input into how to increase accessibility accessibility levels within the district, but achieving those or even exceeding those recommendations from the committee is always permitted. So I would encourage us to have accessibility in our mind in our projects, and staff training will also be a function of that. Of course, this is a giant undertaking, and accessibility can mean many things to many different people. So that's underscoring what the importance of public engagement to help refine that scope. Nonetheless, we should and could be including accessibility as a lens in our projects going forward.
Thank you. As I took the floor because nobody else stuck up their hands fast enough, so I'm going to ask one more question. And that is just, this refers to an accessibility committee, but I can certainly see where there would be rationale of having sort of different types of accessibility committees depending on the nature. So if we were looking at perhaps looking at our transportation system, having a transportation lensed, accessibility committee to advise us on that, or I don't know, other aspects attached to the business of the district, our facilities, for instance. So is when this is talking about an accessibility committee, is the requirement to have one, or is it the requirement under this legislation that we have that advisory body that might change over time, more specific to the project that we require them for? Or do we know that yet?
That's a very interesting perspective. As the legislation states at this time, we're just required to have one accessibility committee, but that doesn't restrict us to the scope of potential subcommittees or various types of committees, as long as we ensure that we meet the sufficient requirements of the original committee.
All right, other questions of staff? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
More of a comment than a question. Thank you for bringing this forward. I have in mind already.
Want to move receipt then? So we can
Yes,
get
I
it.
will move receipt.
See the report moved and seconded. Okay, the motion is live. Go ahead, make comments.
Thanks. I already have in mind a couple of people who I think would be great for sitting on a committee like this, that are residents of Oak Bay. So thanks very much for bringing this forward. I think it's well timed. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Then Councillor Patterson.
Through you, it's a great report. Thank you so much. I too have a couple of people in mind that would be excellent on a committee like this, and I think it's long overdue in Oak Bay. And I think in our active transportation planning and other issues that we've talked about even here tonight, that accessibility and mobility of residents are big issues. So thanks so much. Excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'm sure there will be lots of work for this committee once they get up and running. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for bringing forward the report. I do notice that most of the other municipalities within this region already have committees established. And so it is very important that we have input, I think, from all of the components that feed into this. And I do notice that a lot of the commentary or correspondence we've been getting, we tend to think of the accessibility as affecting people that are aging. I just want to make it perfectly clear that it is really necessary to also include in the membership of this committee persons with disabilities that are not age-related, but they're disabilities of all forms. And so I think it's really important to have a diversity of individuals that feed into this committee. I know I attended the sessions on this, well, in the first year of the first term. I was on council with the minister and persons with disabilities, and I certainly heard a lot from members that were representative of all ages, all types of disabilities, and what they were seeking was definitely diversity on the committee. So I would encourage us to really consider that when we're trying to strike up the list of individuals we want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question about scope and requirements under the Act for Ms. Bagnall, and I know that the wording right in there, the government documents does refer to disabilities, participation of people with disabilities. But is this Act construed even broader than that notion to more making sure that our places and services and approach is accessible to folks who might have language barriers or cultural barriers. So I'd like just your comment on that, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that is a very interesting question. And thankfully, our friends at the BC Accessibility Hub provided a glossary and defined disability as people with an inability to participate fully and equally in society. So that is a broad enough mandate to encapsulate your comments.
Thank you for that. Councillor Smart.
Yes, I guess further to the comments that have been made around the table, I'm wondering, I guess, thinking about the inclusivity piece and the almost cultural inclusivity piece. I can see that this is not yet directly speaking to that, but if this committee that is formed deems to sort of widen its scope to include accessibility and inclusivity, I wonder if when staff comes back presenting options, if that might be part of the discussion too, as to whether that's appropriate or whether it should strictly be about accessibility.
Sure, Ms. Bagnall.
Thank you. As my counterpart, Chris, would say, anything is possible. And certainly if that is the will of council, that is definitely something that staff can consider and bring forward. My advice in my research would be to be very thoughtful about how to proceed when it comes to scope of this committee, because accessibility is so broad in its mandate. And that is part of why staff is recommending public engagement first to help prioritize and scope the accessibility needs of the District of Oak Bay. If it is the will of the council, of course, we can proceed to create a broader mandate of the Accessibility Committee, as long as it does meet our diversity requirements as per the legislation, our Indigenous representation, and meets the requirements of the legislation.
Mr. Coates wanted to add something?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to follow up to Ms. Bagnall's comment, and this is essentially the first step in a very long journey.
I think we're expecting to have this committee for a very long time, right? So that's the reality. A lot of work to do. Go ahead, Councillor Smart. Did you have a follow-up?
No, I think that appropriately answers my question for now. Thank you.
Councillor Smart. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And having come from a province where accessibility was adopted back in 2003 and largely implemented in the late 90s, my caution would be that we don't wait to necessarily form the committee till we have everything that we would like to include, but we try to engage certainly with accessibility that might impact some of the projects that we are going to be working on. And so certainly sidewalks, transportation issues. I think there's certain types of accessibility that and individuals certainly within the community that will feed into that. And then we can have time to incorporate some of the broader aspects of it. But I would hate to see delaying those important components until we try to make sure that we have everything included. I think this is a project that could be considered as always a work in progress, a continuous progress of, but at least get started, because I think some of the voices that we need to hear are critical to some of the projects we're going to be working on earlier. So that's my caution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm going to make one quick comment. I'm supportive of the recommendations that are here. I think they work. I do agree that we have to be somewhat nimble on this, but also just we can in the intervening time certainly reach out, as you've obviously done, to some of these other agencies that provide a lot of lived experience and can provide some advice as well. So we're not without that input. I just want to highlight, because I've been on the the Regional Transit Commission for a number of years, and there's a advisory committee there for accessibility, and the input from that has been really. Now, it is very operational in nature, right? So it's lived experience of people with mobility, with eyesight, with hearing, And it's really informed the changes that have happened in that, and you really see the impacts, and you don't, they're often invisible problems to the majority of people, and I agree this is an incredibly important thing. So it's good to get it right, I'll say that, but I certainly appreciate the approach taken of making this a lens and using the resources we have right now as we spin this up and make it appropriate for the work that we have ahead of us. So I am supportive of the approach recommended here, and I appreciate the comments about this is not something to sit idly by while we're doing this. It's important to continue. So thank you. There's a motion on the floor to receive, so I'm ready to go. Go ahead, Councilor. Yeah, the motion is made to receive at this point, so happy to call the question on that. If there's other comments, are also welcome before we go. Go ahead, Councilor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to follow up on what you're saying because, and Councillor Patterson's observation is that all of our observations that this could get, and probably should over time, get very broad. And it was just an example of how broad it does get. There's already one municipality in the United States who's decided to make themselves accessible and open and welcoming to those with neurocognitive differences, and have designed a program with support to make sure that their services are supporting families who have autistic members in them. So that's just an example of where you can go when you've had enough time to consider it and really build that into how you decide to make yourselves as a society. So I just wanted to flag that as an example of the kinds of things that are being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Watson. I'm going to call the question on the motion to receive. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? We have other motions that are here. We can move them all together if people are willing, but I can separate them if people wish.
I'll move all of the other three, I believe it's another three, other three recommendations that are in the report.
Moved and seconded, thank you. We've had some discussion here already. It's sort of pretty wide ranging on the original motion, but I'm happy to take additional comments. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Just very briefly, Your Worship, actually, I wanted to take the opportunity. I really appreciate Councillor Patterson's comments on this. I'm really pleased to see us moving in this direction with this content, and just want to acknowledge Councillor Patterson for often raising this topic around the council table. And I want to just thank her for her advocacy and her championing this topic, and hopefully this is moving in the right direction for us to make some substantive progress on that. So I just wanted to recognize that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Appleton. I will second that. I think we heard a bunch of people nodding around the table here. I certainly appreciate the advocacy at this table over some time here. All right, we have motions on the floor. Any other discussion on the motions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. I have had no indication. Is there any new business? Need a motion to adjourn? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Oh, were you opposed, Councillor Smart?
Not at all.
You're outvoted. I'm sorry. It's just we are going to adjourn anyway. No, I know you were in favor. I'm just kidding. Little leg there on the video. Have a great time away. We'll see you when you get back.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.